Testing, 1, 2, 3. Just testing out a new mic setup. I hope it's not too loud for everyone out there. Now, let me just get things started. Yep. Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome back to Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson. We're taking up where we left off. Chapter 23. Just close some windows here. Alrighty. So thank you for joining us, and if you want to support the channel and support this journey, please consider donating one time via PayPal, or perhaps joining the Coffee account, setting up a monthly donation as little as $5. Also, there's YouTube memberships, such as one that allows you to get access to a secret Telegram chat where you can talk to me directly. Now, we've got to the fourth sojourn of Beelzebub to the planet, on the planet Earth. What happened in the third one? The third one, he went to Tibet and didn't like what he saw. But, oh, and also, if you want to follow along, the exact PDF I'm using comes from this site, gurdjieff.thework. So this site here, gurdjieff.thework, you can scroll down to the bottom, and they have site contents, library, and in primary texts, the PDF I'm using is the one from the primary text section. Also, I believe, site context, where is it? I think up the top. If you go menu and just click on site contents. Oh, come on. Don't die on me now. Don't die on me now, son. I swear to God. Anyway, oh yeah, okay. Site contents, and then you go down to text of book. And in here, if you then click names, it gives you a list of every single, well, all of the different people, and I think places and neologisms. Gives you all of the, oh, come on, load, bro, load. You're making me look bad here. Oh no, let's just click on one. Yeah, there we go. So it gives you all of the Gurdjieff words that Gurdjieff has made up. Good old, where's a Skoken? Yeah, there you go. And then you click on the word you want, and it kind of gives you a reference of all the other places in the book where that word pops up, so you can get your head around it. It's a good resource. This site is a good resource, gurdjieff.thework. Anyway, where were we? I'll just go back to the main site. Yeah, home. Alrighty, now back to where we were. So let's read on. Let's read on. Chapter 23. Beelzebub continued thus. Of course he did. He's always continuing, never letting anyone else speak. I descended for the fourth time to that planet Earth, owing to the request of my essence friend, Gornohor-Hahak. So remembering this friend, Gornohor-Hahak is a giant raven bird person from the planet Saturn. Go figure. I must first of all tell you that after I had met this Gornohor-Hahak and had become friendly with him, I always, during our subjective exchange of opinions, subjective exchange of opinions, we were just talking sharp. Whenever we again met, shared my impressions with him about the strange psyche of the three-scented beings of that planet of yours. Okay, by the way, I think this is going to be a long chapter, so strap yourself in, kids. Strap yourself in. And the result of these exchanges of opinion of yours concerning your favorites was that he finally also became so interested in them that he once, even very seriously, asked me to keep him always informed, even if only approximately, of my observations of them. Thereafter I sent him, just as I did to your uncle Ilan, copies of all my brief notes concerning the strange particularities of their psyche. So, we're so weird that even a guy from Saturn was like, dude, these guys are crazy. You gotta update me. You gotta tell me the new stuff. What's going on with Mr. Beast? Now, and how Gornohor-Hahak came to be the cause of this descent of mine ensued from the following. I've already told you that after my third personal descent to your planet, I occasionally, for a rest, ascended to the planet Saturn to this friend of mine. When during these flights to him I had become convinced of his great learning, the idea once arose in me to invite him to descend on our ship Occasion to the planet Mars, in order there on the spot to help me personally with his knowledge in the details of arranging my observatory, which was just then being completed. Okay, fair enough. So the Raven from Saturn is a smart boy, and he gave Beelzebub a little bit of help. Here I might as well emphasize the fact that if this observatory of mine afterwards became famous and indeed the best of all the constructions of its kind in the whole universe, I am chiefly indebted to the learning of this same essence friend of mine, so Gornahor, what a Chad. Well then, when I spoke to Gornahor Hahak about this, he without thinking long about it agreed, and together we immediately began to deliberate how to carry out our intention. The problem was that our route from the planet Saturn to the planet Mars would cross such cosmic spheres as did not correspond to the presence of Gunahor Hahak, a being who had as yet the possibilities only for an ordinary planetary existence. So remember, there's different kind of scales of being, and Gornahor isn't of the realm or scale that he can just kind of exist in space self-perpetually by himself. Which is interesting, because it means he's on a lower rung, but at the same time, he's more smart and brilliant than beings that are quote-unquote higher than him, that he can make an observatory so impressive that no one else in the universe, even beings higher than him, can outdo him. The result of our deliberations, then, was that on the following day, his chief assistant began under his direction to arrange a special compartment in our ship Occasion itself, and to furnish it with every kind of adaptation and apparatus for elaborating those substances of which the atmosphere of the planet Saturn consists, and to which Gornahor Hahak was adapted by nature for existence. So they pimped their ride so Gornahor could jump on board with them. We made a jacuzzi and he just sat in. Anyway, when all these preparations had been completed, we who later set out on our journey in the direction of the planet Mars and descended there at my house. I have no idea what that was. That sounds like something Corvian from Saturn. Is that what the compartment they created for Gornahor is called? Anyway. And there on the planet Mars, which had almost the same atmosphere as the planet Saturn, my essence friend Gornahor Hahak very soon became acclimatized and began to exist almost freely. So, of course, remember, this is a novel created by Gurdjieff. Planet Mars and the planet Saturn do not have anything close to the same atmosphere. Well, yeah, no, is it like the atmosphere all that difference, or is it just that one just is loaded with gas and one actually has a solid surface? Yeah. Anyway, it was just during this stay on Mars that he devised that Tescuano, or as your favorites call it, a telescope, thanks chiefly to which, as I have already said, my observatory afterwards became particularly famous through the whole of the universe. The Tescuano he constructed, is indeed a marvel of being reason, as it increases the visibility of remote cosmic concentrations up to 7,285 times during certain process. What is this, like 7 mil? 285. What's 285? That's 15. There's no 369. Maybe he's avoiding those numbers for a specific reason, but then there's no 4 there either. Can you get 4 in any combinations? So I'm just being schizo here. I'm just there wondering if there's anything special about this number that Gurdjieff uses. During certain processes in cosmic substances proceeding in the atmospheres surrounding almost all cosmic concentrations, as well as during certain processes in the cosmic etherochrono of interspatial spheres. Thanks to this Tescuano, I was sometimes fully able, while seated in my house on Mars, to observe almost everything that proceeded on those parts of the surface of other planets of this solar system, which, in the process of what is called the general system movement, were at the given time within the sphere of vision of my observatory. Well then, my dear boy, while Gorna Horhahak was then staying with me as my guest, and we were once together observing the existence of these favourites of yours, a certain fact which we happened to notice was the cause of a very serious exchange of opinions between us concerning the three-centred beings of that peculiar planet of yours. The result of this exchange of opinions of ours was that I undertook to descend onto the surface of that planet and to bring back to the planet Saturn a certain number of beings called their apes. So what is it, alien abducting cows? Nah, he takes a bunch of apes in order to carry out certain elucidating experiments with them concerning the fact we had noticed and which had then surprised us. At this point of Beelzebub's tales, he was given a Lietu Chanbros. Okay, hold on, let me get this. Lietu Chanbros. Lit? That's lit, right? Litu Chanbros. A Litu Chanbros. God damn it, Gurdjieff. That is a special metal plate on which is recorded the text of an etherogram received from somewhere or other. So basically, Gurdjieff predicts iPads. The addressee having only to hold it to his perceptive hearing organ to hear everything communicated. Oh, so it's a text-to-voice little phone. There you go. Gurdjieff predicting technology. When Beelzebub had in this way heard the contents of the Lietu Chanbros handed to him, he turned to his grandson and said, "You see, my boy, what coincidences occur in our great universe." So there's a little synchronicity happening. What did he hear? What did he hear? And remember, he's also going off topic. This is supposed to be about his fourth sojourn to Earth, but let's see where it goes. "It has been sent to me from the planet Mars, and among other things there is communicated in it that the three-centred beings of the planet Earth have again begun to revive what is called the ape question." I must tell you, return to monkey. I must tell you first of all that on account of a cause also ensuing from the abnormal being existence there was long ago crystallized, and there is periodically intensified in its functioning in the presences of those strange three-brained beings arising and existing on the planet Earth, a strange factor which from time to time produces in their presences a crescendo impulse, owing to which during the periods of its action they wish at all costs to find out whether they have descended from these apes or whether these apes have descended from them. So this question plagues humanity from time to time, in a cyclical manner, funnily enough. Well, this is what Gurdjieff is saying. Judging from the etherogram, this question is this time agitating chiefly those biped beings who breed there on the continent called America. America. Although this question always agitates them from time to time, yet every once in a while it becomes there for a long time, as they express it, the burning question of the day. I well remember that this agitation of mind concerning the origin of these apes occurred there among them for the first time, when, as they also like to express it, their center of culture was Tikliamish, so some guy deep in Babylon, maybe, or that kind of region, Sumer, Babylon, Acadia. But prehistory. So after Atlantis, but prehistory Samaria is Tikliamish, prehistory Babylon, Samaria. The beginning of that agitation of mind, there was the wiseacring of a certain learned being of a new formation, there named Menitkel, or Menitkel? No, Menitkel or Menitkel. Which one should we choose? Menitkel. I'll go like that. Or Minitkel. Minetkel. This Minetkel then became a learned being, firstly because his childless aunt was an excellent what is called matchmaker, and mixed a great deal with power-possessing beings. And secondly, because when by age he was approaching the threshold of the being of a responsible being, he received on his birthday a gift of a book entitled Manual of Bonton and Love Letter Writing. Lol. Bonton. What is Bonton? I'm afraid to type it into Google. Is this actually anything? And love letter writing, so it's got to be, lol, Bonton toys. Ooh, hello. Something comfy and love letter writing. Anyway, there's some kind of, I think this is like a book of eroticism. So he got for his birthday. Menetkel has a childless aunt, but she's good at like making money and mixing with the higher crust. And for one of his birthdays, he receives basically 50 Shades of Grey, but like ancient Babylon style. Being materially secure and therefore quite free thanks to an inheritance left by his uncle, a former pawn shop proprietor, he out of boredom compiled a massive and erudite work in which he spun out concerning the origin of these apes, an elaborate theory with every kind of logical proof. So if you give someone too much money and too much time, but they also have quite the intellects, they'll just make some schizo theory about reality and it will possess the minds of a group of people. But of course, with such logical proofs as could be perceived and crystallized only in the reasons of those freaks who have taken your fancy. Him talking to Hassien. Remember that one chapter where Hassien calls us like sluggish, and Beelzebub goes off at Hassien, like saying like, you must never say that. Could you even imagine what would happen if they got their hands on you for saying that? Even if they heard a whisper of you saying it somewhere else, they would find out and like they would just tear you to pieces. And yet he just calls them freaks offhand all the time. Calls us freaks. This Menetkel then proved by his theory that these fellow apes of theirs had descended neither more nor less than from what are called people who became wild. And the other terrestrial beings of that period, as it had already become proper to them, implicitly believed this auntie's darling, so his drunken auntie doted on him, without any essence criticism whatsoever. So because she was in powerful circles, and so she had a kind of a prestige, and she was like, my nephew is perfect, and everything he says is correct, and everyone's like, yep, that's legit. This question, which had then agitated the strange reason of your favorites, became a subject of discussion and fantasying. Fantasizing, maybe, is a better translation? Fantasying. Well, it's definitely not imagining. They fantasize about it and make things up. This story is basically a Yakub. Yeah, like people became wild and went back to being apes. The first white people. And existed right up to what is called the seventh, in turn, great general planetary process of reciprocal destruction. So basically people believed this for a while. Thanks to this maleficent idea, there was even fixed in the instincts of most of these unfortunates at that period still another abnormal what is called dictatorial dictatory factor, which began to engender in their common presences the false feeling that these ape beings were presumably sacred, and the abnormal factor engendering this sacrilegious impulse, also passing by inheritance from generation to generation, has reached the instincts of very many beings, even of the present time. How dare they shoot Harambe? Harambe is a sacred creature. He should never have been let in the vicinity of children, blah, 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 blah. This false idea that arose and was fixed there owing to said pawnshop progeny existed during nearly 2 of their centuries and became an inseparable pair of the reason of the majority of them, and only various events, come on, my mouse wheel's just tripping balls, proceeding from the mentioned general planetary process, effaced it until it ultimately completely disappeared from their common presences. Lol. Lol what? pawnshop progeny. This false idea arose and was fixed there owing to the said pawnshop progeny for nearly 2 of their centuries and became inseparable. Okay, so it eventually disappeared from us, but we may see random ancient art or things where people are actually worshipping apes, and that, even though it's ancient, is still a degeneration from a still more ancient time. But when what is called their cultured existence was concentrated on the continent named Europe, and when the time of the maximum intense manifestation of the peculiar illness, there named to wiseacre, had again come around, which illness, by the way, had already long before become subject to the fundamental law of heptaparaparshinok, so the law of 7, the law of development and evolution and kind of progress, but without its proper stupenders in place, it just kind of bends and circulates, so their wiseacring just sends them in circles, and maybe develops, and gets worse and worse each cycle, according to which it had, in respect of intensity, also to function with a certain periodicity, yeah, there we go, then to the grief of the 3-brained beings of the whole of the universe, that ape question, namely the question, who descended from whom, again arose, and having become crystallized again, became a part of the presence of the abnormal reason of your favorites. Okay, let's see what Gurdjieff's take on this is. It's going to be interesting. The stimulus for the revival there of this ape question was this time also a learned being, and of course also great, but now a learned, being of quite a new formation named Darwin. Okay, we're getting Darwinianism up in here. And this great learned being, basing his theory on that same logic of theirs, began to prove exactly the opposite of what Menetkel had said, namely that it was they themselves who were descended from these Mr. Apes. And as for the objective reality of the theories of both these great terrestrial learned beings, I am reminded of one of the wise sayings of our esteemed Mullah Nasser Eddin, namely, they were both very successful, though of course not without luck, in finding the authentic godmother of the incomparable Scheherazade. See, this isn't a Gurdjieff, this is just another. I'm gonna move past it. That's the princess from 1001 Nights on an old dunghill. So this is a genealogical metaphor, finding the authentic godmother of the Scheherazade. Scheherazade. Oh, God. Just take a shot whenever I mispronounce anything. In any case, you must know and bear in mind that for many centuries, just this question, among similar ephemeral questions, has provided material for the kind of mentation which is considered among your favorites as the highest manifestation of reason. These favorites of yours would, in my opinion, get quite a correct answer to this question, which always excites them. That is, the question how the apes arose, if they were able, in the given case, to apply one of these sayings, again, of our dear Mullah Nasser Eddin, who on many occasions used to say, the cause of every misunderstanding must be sought only in a woman. So it's the genius of women that create mistakes. If they had attempted the solution of this enigmatic question with that wisdom of his, then perhaps they would have finally discovered whence and how these countrymen of theirs had originated. As this question of the genealogy of these apes, there is indeed exceedingly abstruse and unusual. I shall inform your reason about this also as far as possible from every aspect. So he's going to get into this. It's going to be interesting. This is what Gurdjieff's take on where monkeys come from is going to be. But also keep in mind, he's supposed to be telling us about the 4th time he descended to Earth, and he hasn't done that yet. So let's be patient. Let's see. He's trying to distract us. Let's keep our eye on the prize. In fact, neither have they descended from apes, nor have apes descended from them. But, so it's a secret third thing. The cause of the origin of these apes is, in this case, just as in every other misunderstanding, their Also, they're women. Yes, white women. I must tell you, first of all, that the species of terrestrial ape beings now arising there under several different exterior forms never existed at all before the second Transapalnian perturbation. Transapalnian perturbation, the second one, is the fall of Atlantis, remember? So when Atlantis was around, there were no apes. It was only after the fall of Atlantis, but also prehistory to humans, prehistory to us now, that there was something happened, and now that's when apes started to appear. Only afterwards did the genealogy of their species begin. The cause of the arising of this misconceived being, as well as the cause of all the other events more or less serious in an objective sense, which occur on the surface of that ill-fated planet, ensue from two sources, totally independent of each other. The first of them, as always, was the same lack of foresight on the part of certain most high, most very saintly cosmic individuals. Okay. The same lack of foresight. The second was, in the given case, also the same abnormal conditions of ordinary being existence established by themselves. The point is that when the second Transapalnian perturbation, damn straight I got that right in one, occurred to that ill-fated planet, then besides its chief continent Atlantis, many other large and small terra firmas entered within the planet, and in their place new terra firmas appeared on the surface. So instead of Pangea and everything shifting around, also, well, things do shift around, but also literal islands and continents disappear, and as they disappear, they push other things up. These displacements of the parts of the common presence of that ill-fated planet then continued for several days, with repeated planetary tremors, with such manifestations as could not fail to evoke terror in the consciousness and feelings of beings of every kind. During that same period, many of your three-brained favorites, who chanced to survive, together with various one-brained and two-brained beings of other forms, unexpectedly struck upon other newly formed terra firmas in entirely new places unfamiliar to them. It was just as this period that many of these strange Keschapmartian three-brained beings of active and passive sex, or as they say, men and women, can't say that nowadays, were compelled to exist for some years there apart, that is to say, without the opposite sex. Before relating how this then further occurred, I must explain to you a little more in detail concerning that sacred substance, which is the final result of the evolving transformations of every kind of being food formed in the presence of every being without distinction of brain systems. So I think we all know what he's going to talk about here. He's going to talk about what he later dubs hydrogen C12. All right, let's go. This sacred substance, which arises in the presences of beings of every kind, is almost everywhere called Exio-Ihare. Exio-Ihare. What does an E with umlaut sound like? Because you can go E or you can go E. Exio-Ihare. Hari. Exio-Ihare. Ooh, I'm going to need a linguist to help me out with that one. But your favorites on the planet Earth called it sperm. Thanks to the all-gracious foresight and command of our common Father and Creator, and according to the actualization of great nature, this sacred substance, so he calls it a sacred substance, so we're going to get some sacred sexuality going on, my prediction, arises in the presences of all beings without distinction of brain system and exterior coating, chiefly in order that by its means they might consciously or automatically fulfill that part of their being duty which consists in the continuation of their species. But in the presences of three-brained beings, it arises also in order that it might be consciously transformed in their common presences for coating for their highest being bodies for their own being. Okay, this is epic. This is what we want. So a part of creating a higher being body, what do we want? We want to perpetuate ourselves after death. In other words, we don't want our consciousness to fall asleep after death, so we need to awaken. But a part of this awakening isn't just expanding consciousness or gaining new being vibrations, we have to create an astral body or a higher being body. How do we do that? Well, a part of that has to do with some transformation of inner chemicals or inner energies, or in this case, an inner substance, i.e. sperm, into something that can coat and create a higher body. So if you think about it, you can send your sexual forces outwards and you create a new body for a new essence, i.e. a baby. You know, with a man and a woman can create a new baby. Dare I use genders? Or that same force that creates life can be transmuted inwards and upwards, and this can be used to coat and create something within us. So he's alluding to this process here. This is where we got to concentrate here. There's something important here. So before the second Transpalnian perturbation, there, which period of their planet, the contemporary three-brained beings defined by the words, before the loss of the continent Atlantis, when various consequences of properties of the organ Kundabuffa had already begun to be crystallized in their presences, a being impulse began to be formed in them, which later became predominant. This impulse is now called pleasure, and in order to satisfy it, they had already begun to exist in a way unbecoming to three-centered beings. So this is interesting, the pleasure, and it's to do with sexual pleasure. Beings that don't suffer the consequences of the Kundabuffa organ aren't aroused in the same way that we are. I think C.S. Lewis says something similar to this in his out of the Silent Planet trilogy. Anyway, namely, most of them gradually began to remove this same sacred being substance from themselves, only for the satisfaction of the said impulse. So there you go. We have fun times with our sexual energy, and it creates in us a great pleasure. But this pleasure that we experience is a remnant of the Kundabuffa organ. So you can guess that the Kundabuffa organ, was there to make sure that we do copulate and stay on Earth, and we don't just commit suicide, that we actually exist. We continue to exist for pleasure. But now it's crystallized in us way beyond the point of being necessary, and we don't even do it with our partners anymore. We just, any way we can extract the sacred substance from ourselves to just feel that impulse. That's all we need to do. We just need to keep doing that, and we can be satisfied with this continuous pleasure. That's what he's saying, is there's a kind of a degeneration in this way. Well then, my boy, owing to the fact that most of the three-brained beings of the planet Earth thereafter carried out this process of the removal from themselves of this sacred substance, which is constantly formed in them, not at certain periods, normally established by great nature for beings in accordance with their organization, simply for the purpose of the continuation of their species. So most of them just kind of gain the pleasure from continuation of their species. It's paired with that. But in this case, it's a little bit different. And also owing to the fact that most of them ceased to utilize this sacred substance consciously for coating their higher being bodies. So it's not just for coating higher being bodies like, oh yeah, I'm just going to stop ejaculating, I'm going to be chaste, and that's going to make me immortal. No, you have to do something consciously. By expanding consciousness and doing something with the energies inside your body, the cultivation of energy and the cultivation of consciousness, and then the meeting of those two, is what coats the higher being body. The result was obtained that when they do not remove it from themselves by ways which had then already become mechanical, they naturally must express a sensation called oh God. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this, everyone. God damn it, Gurdjieff. Circliniamen. Circliniamen. Okay, I got it. Take that, Gurdjieff. You can't beat me. So, naturally must express a sensation called circliniamen. Yeah, that's right. Or as your favorites there would say, the state defined by the words out of sorts. Okay, so circliniamen means out of sorts. Just say out of sort anyway. which state is invariably accompanied by what is called mechanical suffering. Oh my god, so good. This is Circlinium, men, is post-ejaculatory grief syndrome. It's PEGS. So post-nut clarity. Oh my god. Circlinium, men, is post-nut clarity. Bruh. Well, there you go. You heard it here. Gurdjieff's word for post-nut clarity. Esotericism. People. Esotericism. Now, remind me at some opportune moment about the said periods fixed by nature for the normal process of the utilization of exiocheri by beings of different brain systems for the purpose of the continuation of their species, and I shall explain it to you in detail. Well then, in consequence of the... Wait a second. Remind me at some opportune time. Fixed nature of the normal process. Okay, so he's just he's going to ditch this line of thinking and he's going to go back to talking about something else. Anyway, remember, Gurdjieff is supposed to be telling us about his fourth descent, which he still hasn't told us about. So let's keep going. Well then, in consequence of the aforesaid, and because just like us, they are also only Keschapmartnian beings, and the normal removal from their presences of this sacred substance, which constantly and inevitably arises in them, can proceed exclusively only with the opposite sex, when they utilize it for the continuation of their species by means of the sacred process El Murano, and also because they were not in the habit of utilizing it for the purpose of coding their higher being bodies, so they forgot this process and just used it for the continuation of their species. These chance surviving three-brain beings there, namely those who had already been existing as it is, not becoming for three-brain beings to exist, that is to say, when during several of their years they had existed without beings of the opposite sex, began to turn to various anti-natural means for the removal from themselves of the sacred substance, exioheri, or sperm, formed in them. Oh boy. The beings of the male sex then turned to the anti-natural means called mordorten and androparasti, or as the contemporary beings would say, onanism and pederasty. And these anti-natural means fully satisfy them. So onanism is masturbation, and we all know what pederasty is. So these words then correspond to that. So onanism, so masturbation in Gurdjieff's secret esoteric term for masturbation is mordorten. So I'm mordortening. I'm cooming, I'm mordortening. And androparasti is his term for a PDF file, or someone who participates of the lifestyle of a PDF file is given to androparasti. Well, andro being, andro kind of anthropology, the study of man, so andro, man, parasti, pederasty, some kind of similar etymology he's used there. But anyway, so the basically, what is he talking about? He's talking about how monkeys came to be, or sorry, how apes came to be. And he's basically saying the male, after Atlantis fell, there was a group of humans who the sexes were split due to some unforsaken means, like one boat got separated from the other, and it just had all the men on one and all the women on the other. And all of the men were just like, well, there's no women around, so they started just kind of jerking it and also doing stuff to kids. Ew. And then what's happening to the women? But for the three-brained beings of the passive sex, or as they're called women, the said anti-natural methods proved to not be sufficiently satisfying, so they weren't getting their the pleasure principle from the Kundabuffa wasn't satisfied via just more dortening. And so the poor woman orphans of that time began already then more cunning, being already then more cunning and inventive than the men there. began to seek out and accustom beings of other forms of the given place to be their partners. Well then, it was after these partnerships that those kinds of beings also began to appear in our great universe, who in themselves are, as our dear Mullah Nasser Eddin would say, neither one thing nor the other. Oh boy. So we're going to get half-breeds. So white women, because of white women, no, because of some post-Atlantean women mating with creatures, other creatures, not three-brained being creatures, but perhaps two-brained and maybe even one-brained creatures, those women were able to give birth to half-breeds. Concerning the possibility of this abnormal blending of two different kinds of exiochares for the conception and arising of a new planetary body of a being, it is necessary to explain to you also the following. On the Earth, just as on other planets of our universe, the Keschapmartnian three-brained beings breed and exist. That is to say, those three-brained beings, the formation of whose exiochare for the purpose of creating a new being must obligatorily proceed in the presences of two distinct independent sexes. The fundamental difference between the sacred exiochares formed in the presences of the distinct and opposite sexes of Keschapmartnian beings, so this is a scale of being, I guess, that is to say, in men and women, it is that in the exiochare, or the sexual fluids, formed in the presences of beings of the male sex, and the localized sacred affirming or positive force of the sacred triamazikamno participates, while for the completed formation of the exiochare in the presences of beings of the female sex, there participates the localized sacred denying or negative force of the same sacred law. So beings of opposite sexes both have exiochare or sperm or sexual fluids, really, and the sexual fluids participate in the law of triamazikamno, or the law of three. So males have a positive force, females have the negative or denying force, and the neutral force must come into play somehow. So let's see what he says. And owing to the same all-gracious foresight and command of our Father of everything existing in the great universe, and according to the actualizations of Great Mother Nature, then in certain surrounding conditions, and with the participation of the third separately localized holy force of the sacred triamazikamno, namely the holy force called reconciling, the blending of these two exiochares arising in two distinct, independent, different beings just gives, owing to the process called the process of the sacred El Murano, so sex, which proceeds between those beings of opposite sex, the beginning for the arising of a new being. So when two beings, one who has that produce exiochare, one has the affirming force, males, one has the denying force, females, they come together in sex, or the sacred principle or process called El Murano activates, which the universe then itself supplies the third force, the reconciling force, which then the mixture of these forces creates a new being. So now if we think about that in higher being bodies, how do you create a higher being body then? Because if you're a male, then you only have one of the three forces, and maybe you can attract the universe participating with you, gives you that negative force, but gives you the reconciling force, but you still need the opposite. Or if you're a female, you need some active affirming force. So is there a kind, so this is, I'm like, Gurdjieff, is he talking about Tantra here? Is he saying you need a kind of a tantric method to properly crystallize a higher being body? Where is he going? Let's see if he's going in this direction. And the possibility in the given case, my dyslexia is coming out, case of such an abnormal blending of two different kinds of exiochare then occurred owing only to a certain cosmic law called the affinity of number of the total vibrations. Which, thank God he didn't just give us I'm surprised he didn't make this some crazy word. Which proceeded owing to the second Transapalnian perturbation to this ill-fated planet, and which then still continued to act for its own common presence. Okay, concerning this cosmic law just mentioned, it is now absolutely necessary to tell you that it arose and began to exist in the universe after the fundamental sacred law of Triamazi Kamno was changed by our Creator for the purpose of rendering the Heropass harmless. Ooh. Okay, so a law, one of the fundamental laws that created the universe, was changed or tweaked by the Creator. So, and Heropass, remember, Heropass is time itself, or objective time, not just our sense of time that our consciousness creates, but there's some kind of objective time that God needed to negate, and to do so, he tweaked something in the law of three. So we're getting some spicy cosmic principles here. And after its previously totally independent holy part had begun to be dependent upon forces coming from outside, okay, you will understand this cosmic law also in all its aspects when as I have already promised you. I shall explain to you in detail all the fundamental laws in general of world creation and world existence. Okay, so he's going to duck us again. He's going to drop something. He's going to drop something hot, and then he's going to duck us. duck back to another conversation line and leave us hanging. Let me just read that again. Concerning this cosmic law just mentioned, it is now absolutely necessary to tell you that it arose and began to exist in the universe after the fundamental sacred law of Triamazi Kamno was changed. So the universe created with the law of Triamazi Kamno, and then Triamazi Kamno changed so that the Creator could fight time. But because it was changed... Okay, is he saying... So he's saying after it's been changed, now you can't... because this whole thing is about women mating with animals to create apes. But he's saying now that's not possible anymore. Because think of like mythology. There's all these things in mythology. It's like, a woman, sleeps with a bull and creates Minotaur. There are all of these weird things like that. So, is he saying it's not possible to do that anymore because the mixing and blending of sexual energy has changed properties because God himself changed something in the law of three because he was trying to do some other process to fight off objective time? Okay, this is food for thought here. Let's keep going. You will understand. Yeah, okay, so he's ducking us now, and he's going to go back to something else. Remember, he still hasn't told us about his descent. Meanwhile, know concerning this question that in general, everywhere on normally existing planets of our great universe, the exioheri, or sperm, formed in the presence of three-brained beings, of a three-brained being, who has perceptive and transformative organs for localizing the wholly affirming part of the sacred Triamazi Kamno, that is to say, a Keschapmartnian being of the male sex, can, owing to the just mentioned cosmic law, never be blended with the exioheri formed in the presences of the Keschapmartnian two-brained being of the opposite sex. Okay, so basically, if a man breeds with a two-brained being, so if a man lies with an animal, it can't actually create new life, but at the same time, the exioheri formed in the three-brained being, Keschapmartnian being of a female sex, can sometimes, in those cases when a special combination of the blending of cosmic forces is obtained and the mentioned law comes into effect, be completely blended under certain surrounding conditions with the exioheri formed in two-brained Keschapmartnian beings of the male sex, but only as the active factor in such an actualizing process of the fundamental sacred Triamazi Kamno. Okay, so female three-brained beings that lie with animals, or two-brained beings, can technically mix and create offspring, but sometimes only under special conditions. But is that what he was talking about has been changed now? What was he talking about here? Okay. I'm getting a bit twisty-tied, but we're just going to have to keep going. In short, during the said terrible years on this planet of yours, a result very rare in the universe was obtained. So this almost never happens on other planets, but we made it happen. That is to say, there was obtained the blending of the exioheres of two Keschap-Martnian beings. What the, let me... I gotta look up what this means again. I'm pretty sure that's just a type of being. Of different brain systems of opposite sexes, and as a result, there arose the ancestors of these terrestrial misconceived beings now called apes. Remember Beelzebub took a bunch of apes to Saturn to study? And maybe that's how he found out the genealogy. Anyway, who give your favorites no peace, and who from time to time agitate their strange reason. But when after the mentioned terrible period there on your planet, when the relatively normal process of ordinary existence was re-established and your favorites of different sexes again began to find each other and to exist together, then the continuation of the species of the ape beings was thereafter actualized also among beings similar to themselves. And this continuation of their species by these abnormally arisen ape beings, there could be further continued among themselves, because the conception for the arising of the first of these abnormal beings had also proceeded owing to those same mentioned external conditions, thanks to which the presences of future Keschap-Martnian beings of active or passive sex are generally determined. Blur? Continuation of their species. Okay. Okay, so humans came back together, started making more humans, and these weird ape beings also came back together. The most interesting result of this already excessively abnormal manifestation of the three-brained beings of your planet is that there now exist a great many species of generations of ape beings different in exterior form, and each of these varied species bears a very different resemblance to some form of a two-brained quadruped being still existing there. This came about because the blending of exioheri of the Keschap-Martnian three-brained beings, there of the female sex, which served as a beginning for the arising of the ancestors of these apes, then proceeded with the active exioheri of those same varied quadruped beings existing there up to the present time. Okay, and indeed, my boy, when during the period of my last stay on the planet Earth, I chanced during my travels to meet with the said various independent species of apes, and when, by a habit which has become second nature, I also observed them, I constated very differently that the whole of the inner functioning of what are called the automatic posture of each separate species of these contemporary apes there are exactly like those present in the whole of the presences of some normally arisen quadruped being there, that even what are called their facial features are, oh my god, Jesus Christ. What a freaking paragraph. To just be like, okay, their facial features are, are very human-like and disturb us greatly. Very definitely resemble those of the said quadrupeds, but on the other hand, that what are called the psychic features of all the separate species of these apes there are absolutely identical. Okay, and even down to details with those of the psyche of the three-brained beings there of the female sex. Oh my god. So, after Atlantis, there was a splitting of the sexes by accident, and men started jerking it, doing some more Dorton, and women started having sex with animals, which created these weird ape beings, which then went off and mixed with other two-brained beings and created all the different ape species we see. There we go. And they all have, apes all have the same, even though they're exteriorly different, they all have the same psychic features, allegedly. At this point of his tales, Beelzebub had made a long pause and looked at his favorite Hassian with a smile, which very clearly expressed a double meaning. He continued to smile, said, In the text of the ethiogram, which I have just received, it is further said that in order, this time, to finally settle who has descended from whom, whether they from the apes or the apes from these freaks, your favorites, have decided to carry out scientific experiments. Jesus Christ. I see. North Secret Adventures just dropping in. This is a great series. Definitely not for 2 brains. Yeah, you're gonna need three brains to make it through this. Jesus Christ. Okay. And furthermore, let me just move this over here. And furthermore, that several of them have already left for the continent of Africa, where many of these apes breed with the object of bringing back from there the number required for these scientific investigations of theirs. Okay. To judge by this ethiogram, the beings of the planet Earth who have taken your fancy are again in their turn-up to their extraordinary tricks. From all I have learned about them during my observations, I foresee that this scientific experiment will, of course, very greatly interest other of your favorites also. So he's talking to Hassian, and the favorites are, of course, other humans, other freaks, and will serve for a time as material to their strange reason for endless discussion and talk. So this is what Gurdjieff believes is the origin of apes. It's interesting, it's not the origin of man, it's the origin of apes. So then the question still becomes, where do humans come from? He doesn't quite say. Are we just seeds of the divine then? I wonder what Gurdjieff, R.I.P. Gurdjieff would have loved Yakub and all of the schizo theories nowadays. And all of this will be quite in the order of things there. Concerning the scientific experiment itself, which they propose to carry out with the apes taken back from Africa, I can with certainty say beforehand that at any rate, the first part of it will without any doubt succeed wonderfully well. And it will succeed wonderfully well because the apes themselves, as beings of what is called a Terbelnian result, are already, owing to their nature, extremely fond of occupying themselves with titillation, and before the day is out will no doubt participate in and greatly assist your favorites in this scientific experiment of theirs. R.I.P. Harambe would have loved scientific experiments. Now, as for those beings there who are going to carry out this scientific experiment, and as for any benefit from it, for the other 3 brain beings there, it can all be pictured to oneself, if one remembers the profoundly wise saying of our same Honourable Mullah Nazir ad-Din, in which he says, "Happy is that father whose son is even busy with murder and robbery, for he himself will then have no time to get accustomed to occupy himself with titillation." Okay, so it's better for your son to be a criminal than to be idle. Yes, my boy. You know, your kid's got to get after it, or else. It seems that I have not yet told you why and by whom, since I left the solar system ores, I am kept informed by ethiograms. Okay, still Beelzebub isn't telling us about his 4th personal journey, but now he's going to tell us who his spy is on Earth that keeps him updated on Earth, of the most important events which occur on the various planets of that system, and of course also about events proceeding on your planet Earth. You remember I told you that my first descent in person upon the surface of that planet of yours took place on account of one of the young beings of our tribe, who then had no desire to stay there any longer but return with us to the planet Mars, where he later became a very good chief over all the beings of our tribe existing on that planet, and who is now already the chief over all the beings in general of our tribe, who for various reasons still exist on certain planets of that system, ores. Well then, my boy, when I left that system, I presented my famous observatory to him with everything in it, and in gratitude for this he promised to report every month according to the time calculation of the planet Mars, and the more important events occurring on the planets of that system. Okay. So that guy, I don't think he got named, but it's like that guy's now a spy. He's the sussy spy that gives Beelzebub all his info. And now this chief keeps me very accurately informed of the most important events proceeding on all the planets on which there is a being existence. And does that mean there are planets without being existences? Anyway. Because even the moon allegedly has ant people on it. Anyway. Knowing my great interest in the three-brained beings breeding on the planet Earth, he does his best, as I now see, to elucidate and send me information concerning all those manifestations of theirs, which can give me now also the possibility of being constantly informed of the whole process of the ordinary existence of these three-brained beings. Even though I find myself already inaccessibly remote even for their featherweight thoughts, okay? That chief of our beings, who remains there, collects the various kinds of information he communicates concerning the three-brained beings of the planet Earth, either by means of his own observations of them through the great Tescuano, or telescope, which I left him, or from reports which in their turn are communicated to him by those three-brained beings of our tribe who choose to exist forever on the planet Earth. Interesting. So there's a secret cache of Martians somewhere, either existing together or existing disparately around the place, that just want to be left alone, but also peek in on us and are like, man, what are these crazy earthlings doing? And all three of whom have at present time on the continent of Europe different substantial independent undertakings indispensable for everyone existing there under the prevailing conditions. Okay. So there are 3 Martians. Is that what he's saying? Who live forever on planet Earth? Anyway, one of them has in one of the large cities an undertaker's business. The second is in another large city, has a bureau for what are called matchmaking and divorce. And a third is the proprietor of many offices founded by himself in various cities for what is called money exchange. So one has to deal with death, the other marriage, and the other with taxes and money. Very interesting. However, my boy, owing to this etherogram, I have wandered a long way from my original tale. Yeah. Let us go back to our former theme. Well then, upon this 4th flight of mine to the planet Earth, our ship occasion descended onto the sea called Red Sea. Where is this? Exactly. Give us the Red Sea. Okay, Red Sea. So, Beelzebub... Get away. Okay, so, Jeddah. Israel. Yemen. So, between Israel, Yemen, between Sudan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, Beelzebub's 4th descent is here. Where's Ethiopia there? Wonder if Beelzebub left any technology, Ethiopia. Very interesting. And we descended upon this sea because it washed the eastern shores of a continent where I wished to go. So this Beelzebub goes to Africa, namely to the continent called Grabontzi, and now called Africa, on which those ape beings I needed then bred more than any other of the terra firmas, or parts of the surface of that planet of yours. And also because this sea was at that period particularly convenient for the mooring of our ship occasion. But what was still more important was that on one of its sides, that country was situated, which was then called Nilia. Kind of Nilia, Nile, and is now called Egypt. Yep, that checks out. So Red Sea, Beelzebub drops there. Let me just not close my window, just in case there's some ambient sounds from outside. So Beelzebub's dropping Red Sea, and now he's curious about Egypt. Let's see what's up. Where those beings of our tribe then existed who wished to remain on that planet, and with whose help I intended to collect the apes. Okay. Well then, having descended upon the Red Sea, we sailed from the ship occasion on Okay, let's do this, Gurdjieff. Epodrenex. Okay, that's actually pretty simple, that one. Nothing too trippy about that word. To the shore. And afterwards, on camels, we came to that town where our beings existed, and which was then the capital of the future Egypt. What the hell is this? He usually explains everything, and then he doesn't mention it. This may never get mentioned again, or maybe it will get mentioned again. We'll see. We'll see. This capital city was then called Thebes. Okay, so Beelzebub goes to Thebes, lol. And on the very first day of my arrival in the city of Thebes, one of the beings of our tribe existing there told me, among other things, in the course of our conversation, that the beings of the earth of that locality had devised a new system for observing other cosmic concentrations from their planet. So, planets, other cosmic concentrations means planet. And that they were then constructing, or, stars and whatnot, constructing what was required in order to carry it into effect. And also, as everybody there said, that the convenience and possibilities of this new system were excellent and until then unparalleled on Earth. So Thebes was going to get their astronomy down. They were down with some astrology. We're going to study the stars. Forget the Sabians, forget the Chaldeans, us Thebians, we're going to be the best astronomers. Now, and when he had related all he had himself seen with his own eyes, I immediately became greatly interested, because from his description of certain details of this new construction there, it seemed to me that these terrestrial beings had perhaps found a means of overcoming that inconvenience about which I myself had just previously been thinking a great deal, while I was completing the construction of my observatory on the planet Mars. And so I decided to postpone for a while my first intention of immediately going further south on the continent to collect the apes I needed, and instead to go first where the said construction was being made, in order on the spot to become personally acquainted with it from every aspect and to find out all about it. Well then, the day following our arrival in the city Thebes, accompanied by one of the beings of our tribe who already had my friends there, and also by the chief constructor of the said construction, and of course by our Ahun, so Beelzebub's manservant Ahun. Also, I went this time on what is called a churtetev, down the tributary of that great river now called the Nile. Okay, so I assume that's a kind of boat or raft. Near where the river flowed into a large Celiacoreapnian area. Those constructions were just being completed, one part of which interested me. So what is this? Some kind of dam or so? Anyway. The district itself, where the work was being carried on both for this new, what they called observatory, and for several other constructions for the welfare of their being existence, was then called Avaslin. The work was being carried on both for this new observatory, for their being. A few years, a Vaslin. That's a very interesting word. And a few years later, it came to be called their Kairunana. And at the present time, it is simply called the outskirts of Cairo. Oh, okay. So there's just a part of their city. That tripped me there. I was like, is this a substance? What is this? Jesus. The mentioned constructions had been begun long before by one of what are called their pharaohs, the name by which the beings of that region called their kings. And at the time of my fourth flight to the earth and my visit to this place, the special constructions he had begun were already completed by his grandson, also a pharaoh. Although the observatory, which interested me, was not yet quite finished, nevertheless observations of the exterior visibility of cosmic concentrations could be made from it, and the results issuing from them and the reciprocal action of these results could be studied. Those beings who were occupied with such observations and studies were called, at that period on the earth, astrologers. Oh, baby. But when afterwards that psychic disease of theirs called wiseacring became finally fixed there, owing to which these specialists of theirs also shriveled and shrank, and became specialists only in giving names to remote cosmic concentrations, they came to be called astronomers. Inasmuch as the difference in significance and sense in relation to the surrounding beings between those from among the three-brained beings who have taken your fancy, who at that time were such professionals. This is interesting because my impression is Gurdjieff didn't really think too highly of astrology, but let's see what he says. And those who have now, as it were, the same occupation might show you, so to say, the obviousness of the steady deterioration of the degree of crystallization of data engendering the sane logical mentation, which ought to be present in the common presences of your favorites as three-brained beings. I therefore find it necessary to explain to you and to help you to have an approximate understanding of this difference, which is also changing for the worse. At that period, these terrestrial three-brained beings already of responsible age, whom the others named astrologers, besides making the said observations and investigations of various other cosmic concentrations, for the purpose of a greater, as is said, detailizing of that branch of general learning of which they were representatives, fulfilled several further definite essence obligations taken upon themselves towards surrounding beings similar to themselves. Jesus Christ. Woo! Among their fundamental definite obligations that they also, like our Zerlichners. Whoa! What is this? So our Zerlichners, is this maybe like esoteric space astrologers? What is this? Okay, a fool's journey. Julius Evola refers to the zone of shadow, the intermediate zone between what man knows and what he doesn't. The Romans named many gods out of it, not obeying moral or similar to Gurdjieff's many eyes. When Gurdjieff talks about the many eyes of man, he always talks about it in the negative light, whereas like the zone of the shadow, or is something which can give birth to both gods and demons. Whereas when Gurdjieff talks about many eyes, he usually talks about it disparagingly. It's like there shouldn't be many eyes, there should just be, you need one. We need to make one. Synthesize, boil it down. Boil down the, you have like filings of metal and you, kind of a glass jar, and you boil them all in, and they melt and they turn into one thing. Where am I going? Had to advise all the conjugal pairs in their what was now called flock, according to the types of those pairs, about the time and form of the process of the sacred El Murano. Okay. So he says, so basically, is this what he says? Like, beings, they're Zilnikers, is this the Martians, use astrology to determine when you should have sex. That's basically what they're talking about. For the purpose of a desirable and corresponding conception of their results. And when such results were actualized, or as they themselves say, newly born, they had to draw up their obliquionarish, or natal chart, I guess, which is the same as what your favorites call horoscope. And later, either they themselves or their substitutes had, during the whole period of the formation of the newly born, for responsible existence and of their subsequent responsible existence, to guide them and to give corresponding indications on the basis of the said obliquionarish, and also on the basis of the cosmic laws, constantly explained by them, flowing from the actions of the results of other large cosmic concentrations, in general on the process of being existence of beings on all planets. Ugh. So everything is interconnected, all rays influence other rays. So by understanding this science, you can kind of help a brother out. These indications of theirs, and also their, so to say, warning counsels, consisted in the following. When a function became disharmonized, or only began to be disharmonized, I think a Zilniker is something like a medical doctor. That makes sense. I mean, astrology was used by medical doctors in, what is it, the Renaissance period, medieval period. It was like, that was, astrology was still taught in universities by medical professionals. Um, one of the other things about the degeneration of astrology nowadays. See, nowadays astrologers are always like positive. They're sickeningly positive. Like, your perfect match, or let's do this chart and like everything's gonna be good, and this is when something good luck is gonna happen. That was never how astrology used to be used. It used to be, the whole thing about astrology, how it used to be used is, when is something bad going to happen? People would go to an astrologer to be like, when's the next bad thing going to happen so that I can prepare for it? It was almost like a negative science. Like, let's go and let's find out when the next tragedies, the next sicknesses will strike, the next misfortunes will happen, and then we can prepare for them. That was how it used to be worked. But then modern astrology came along and it's like, oh, this planet is in alignment, therefore a tall, dark man is going to come into your life and just sweep you. You know, it's always sickeningly positive. And it's like, there's no bad astrology. Yeah. No. Completely wrong. Anyway, that's just a little critique on filthy, degenerate modern astrology. Now, in the presence of any being of their flock, then this being applied to the astrologer of his district, who, on the basis of the said obliquionerish made by him, and on the basis of the changes expected according to his calculations in the process proceeding in the atmosphere, flowing in their turn from the action of the other planets of their solar system, indicated just what he had to do to his planetary body at which definite periods of the Krenton-Alnian movements of their planet. Whew! As for instance, in which direction to lie, how to breathe, what movements preferably to make, with which types to avoid relations, and many things of the same kind. Very interesting. You can kind of see how like a lot of astrology and proper astrology kind of bled into like ceremonial magic, Western ceremonial magic. In addition to all this, they assigned to the beings at the 7th year of their existence, likewise on the basis of these obliquionerishes, Jesus Christ, just say nail chart, bro, corresponding mates of the opposite sex for the purpose of fulfilling one of the chief being duties, that is, continuation of the race, or as your favorites would say, they assigned them husbands and wives. So being duty, a part of your being duty is to make baby. Justice must be done to your favorites of the period when astrologers existed among them. They then indeed very strictly carried out the indications of these astrologers and made their conjugal unions exclusively only according to their indications. Therefore, at that period, in regard to their conjugal unions, they always corresponded according to their type, just as such pairs correspond everywhere on planets, on which Keschap-Martinian beings also breed. Okay. Wait just a minute, let me read that again. Therefore, at that period, in regard to their conjugal unions, they always corresponded according to their type, just as pairs being everywhere on planets. Okay, so basically, they do this on all other planets as well. This is how normal marriage is processed. Whereas nowadays, it's just free love, just anybody on anybody. We don't let astrologers dictate anymore. Who knows if that's a degeneration or not? Anyway, these ancient terrestrial astrologers made these matches successfully, because even if they were very far from the knowledge of many cosmic autoegocratic truths, yet they at least already very well knew the laws of the influence of different planets of their solar system on the beings breeding on their own planet. Namely, the influence of these planets on a being at the moment of his conception for further formation, as well as for his complete acquisition of the being of responsible being. Jeez, that was a bit of a mouthful. So, way astrology works, to keep in mind to people out there, the whole thing with astrology is it's just energy that comes in and creates kind of structures within you, energetic structures. But this framework it's mutable by via your own conditions, because we all live in a society, we all have our own genetics codes. Even it doesn't really even work the same on twins. So yeah, like if you look at a natal horoscope, like, I don't know, you got Aries in your moon. If two people are twins, then they have the same horoscope or natal chart, and it's like, but you know, the energy of the moon in Aries can still be processed differently in each of them. It's like, what's the moon? Moon is like water, consciousness, emotions. What's Aries? Fire, kind of force. It could mean like, moon, feminine energy. It could mean one twin will always have trouble with what moon, feminine mother. One twin will always have trouble like with her mom. They'll always have conflicts with her mother. Whereas the other twin, it could just be like literally water, like she hates water, she hates the ocean, and so she just like chooses always places like mountains or like meadows or somewhere in the city to live or something like that. How the energies are processed in you are very different. There are architectonic structures that are, or just kind of like, it's not patterns, it's more like just a kind of a slight blueprint that the zodiacal forces impress on you, but there's a whole bunch of other things that go up into the makeup, a whole bunch of other conditions. And then your own essence, your little will tries to, you have a being essence and the will tries to come out, but what does it hit? It hits biological limitations. It hits the zodiacal structures. It hits societal norms that you've crystallized in your being reason. And the will either just gets negated and fizzles out, your being will, or it is deflected and diverted in another direction. Very rarely does someone have a being essence that's actually strong enough to exert itself properly in the world. So using things like astrology is interesting to kind of get a map of your psychology or some aspects of your psychology, but the work is really to strengthen your little essence so that it can actually manifest properly in the world. Fool's Journey says in Meditations chapter 12, author says one must go beyond the zodiac. Yeah, exactly. Energetic structures must be broken beyond through divine will, a gravitation towards spirit, not earth. Our zodiac's based. So this is the thing about zodiac. There's a lot of use of it in ceremonial magic, but also, science will be like, oh, astrology bad. But even before science was a thing, church was like, zodiac, astrology bad. Even before the church, there were people who were like, yeah, you shouldn't study the zodiac. Who are they? They were the theurgists. Yeah, I guess you could say like the equivalent of the fourth way back in ancient times. Theurgists were like, don't study the zodiac because you get bound to it the more you study it. It's something very interesting. It can be useful. It's useful to know a little bit. I mean, I would like to learn more personally, but it's still, you're wanting to transcend it. It's like learning about your biology. Learning about your biology and your physiology can be super useful, but you want to transcend beyond that. We want to coat higher being bodies. We don't want to become so obsessed with our own biology that we just focus on it for the rest of our lives and forget about it. So yeah, chapter 12, Meditations of the Tarot, we either need that superior force to come into us to, aid us, the divine will to break through, or to strengthen something within us that it can actually kind of make its way out and exert its way in the world. So, little side tangent there. Let's get back on track, guys. So, having thanks to the information transmitted to them from generation to generation, a many-centered practical knowledge, they already knew which types of passive sex corresponded to which types of active sex. So, zodiacal eugenics, baby, let's go. Owing to all this, the pairs matched according to their indications almost always turned out to be corresponding, and not as it proceeds there at the present time, and that is to say, they are now united in conjugal pairs who nearly always do not correspond in type. Yeah. Oh yeah. In consequence of which, during the continuation of their entire existence of these couples, about half of their, as they say, inner life is spent only on what our esteemed Mullah Nasser ad-Din expresses in one of his sayings by the following words. I wonder if any of these sayings are actually said by Mullah Nasser ad-Din. Got to look through some Idrias Shah books and find these. what a good husband he is, or what a good wife she is, whose whole inner world is not busy with the constant nagging of the other half. Nag people who annoy you. Naggers. In any case, my boy, if these astrologers had continued to exist there, then surely, thanks to their further practicing, the existence of the beings of this unfortunate planet would by now have gradually become such that their family relations would at least have been a little like the existence of similar beings on the other planets of our great universe. So this is really interesting. He's actually saying astrology good. I thought Gurdjieff was like, astrology lame, but it could be like, the modern rendition of astrology. Astrology was lost, and it came back in, the 1920s. The Theosophists before then tried to kind of bring it back, but there was all these gaps missing. You forget it, you lose that in technology. Where is it? It's in old Latin texts, which you need to translate. It's in old Greek texts, old Arabic texts. So they didn't have a lot of these texts. So modern astrology gets made, and people just arbitrarily filled in the gaps. Like, in modern astrology, what do they say? They say, Aquarius. Aquarius isn't governed by Saturn, it's governed by Uranus. You know why Uranus governs Aquarius in modern astrology? It's because some guy just felt that was correct. Yep, he just made some shit up. Never anywhere in any ancient text do they include Uranus. All of this stuff, they jam Pluto in now, they jam... modern astrology, they like to, comets, all of this, it's all fluff that's added on. I think it was in the 1980s, long after Gurdjieff died, there was something called the Hindsight Project, where like 3 dudes got together and one knew Arabic, one knew Greek, one knew Latin, and they started translating old texts. And apparently they didn't do too well, but it's from that project that continued on nowadays that we have all of these books like Hellenistic astrology and all of these ancient books that have been able to revitalize the world of traditional or pre-modern astrology. Now you have on the internet not just astrologers arguing with each other, but pre-modern, traditional, classical astrologers. Some astrologers that are like, I purely do Hellenic astrology, I purely do Egyptian astrology. Now everybody gets to like fight with each other and all have all give their own subjective being opinions to each other. Isn't that great? But whatever happens, just if you see someone who's a modern astrologer, just ignore what they have to say. Now, but all this, which was beneficently established in the process of their existence, they have also sent, like all their good attainments, without even having had time to make good use of it, to the gluttonous swine of our respected Mullah Nasser Eddin. And these astrologers of theirs, as usually happens there, also at first began gradually to shrink, and then entirely, as it is said, vanished. So the true astrologers all died. After the total abolition among them of their duties of these astrologers, other professionals in the same sphere appeared in their place. But this time, from among the learned beings of new formation, who also began to observe and study, as it were, the results issuing from various large cosmic concentrations and their influence on the existence of the beings of their planet. But as the ordinary beings around these professionals soon noticed that their observations and studies consisted merely in inventing names for various remote suns and planets, meaning nothing to them, existing in myriads in the universe, and in measuring, as it were, by a method known to them alone, and which constituted their professional secret, the distance between the cosmic points seen from their planets through their child's toys, called by them telescopes, they began to call them, as I have already told you, astronomers. So the science became abstract and aloof, and yeah, there became a divide between normal people and these astronomers then. It then has no practical use for you in your day-to-day life. Planets, they're just, it's just some far away cosmic concentration in another part of the universe. I'm not even going to give it a proper name. It's just called like 1-2b or something. 2b 5 6 7 8 9. Yep, it's a sun I found. I'm just going to leave it over there, and it means nothing to you. We're gonna have all of these new measurements, all these new terms which mean nothing to you. It abstracts it away from the normal person. And so astrology became astronomy, and that is the degeneration of astrology into astronomy. Now, my dear boy, that we have spoken also about these contemporary ultra-fantasists. So not just normal fantasists, they're ultra-fantasists. From among your favorites, we might as well, again, imitating the form of mentation and the verbal exposition of our dear teacher, Mullah Nasruddin. Man, Nasruddin's getting some quotes in this chapter. Also illuminatingly enlighten you about their significance, so esteemed by your favorites. First of all, you should know about that ordinary cosmic something actualized for these same terrestrial types, which is in general always actualized of itself for every cosmic unit, and which serves for beings with objective reason as what is called an issuing source, for pondering about the explanation of the sense and meaning of any given cosmic result. Okay, let's see what he says. This same something, which serves as an issuing source for discovering the significance of these terrestrial contemporary types, is a wiseacring map named by themselves, of course unconsciously, the map of heavenly spaces. Star maps, baby. There is no need for us to draw any other logical conclusion from this issuing source specially actualized for them. It will be sufficient merely to say that the name itself of this map of theirs shows that the designations made on it cannot in any way be other than entirely relative, because, with the possibilities at their disposal, though they break their esteemed heads over devising names and calculating various kinds of measurements, they can see from the surface of their planet only those suns and planets which, to their good fortune, do not very quickly change the course of their falling in relation to their own planet, and thus give them the possibility during a long period of time, of course, long as compared with the brevity of their own existence, to observe them, and as they bombastically express themselves, mark down their positions. In any case, my boy, however worthless the results of the activities of these contemporary representatives of learning among your favorites, please don't be angry with them. If they do not bring any benefit at all to your favorites, they at least do not do them any great harm. Okay, there you go. So astronomers may be useless to humanity, but at least they're not being actively doing bad things. After all, they must be occupied with something. It is not for nothing that they wear spectacles of German origin and special smocks sewed in England. Let them be occupied with this. God bless them. Yep, just let them fall into their games. Otherwise, like most of the other freaks there who are occupied with, as they say, their higher matters, they will busy themselves out of boredom, leading the struggle of 5 against 1. And it is known to all that the beings who are occupied with these matters always radiate from themselves vibrations very harmful for beings around them similar to themselves. So that's interesting. So people who, like, these are a type of intellectual that just likes to be satisfied with intellectual drivel that has no use. But they take pride in that. Those types of people emit a type of vibration that's actually a negative vibration for your development. Well, enough. Leave these contemporary titillators in peace, and let us continue our interrupted definite theme. Yes, please. In view of the fact, my boy, that this conscious ability expressed in the creation of such a construction unparalleled, so we're going back to, Africa here, and Thebes. Hopefully he's talking about the observatory, I think. Both after this period, of which I was then an eyewitness, was also the result of the attainments of the beings and members of the learned society, Achaldan. Okay, here's that mention of the Achaldan Society again, which was formed on the continent of Atlantis. So the remnants, post-fall of Atlantis, remnants of the Achaldan Society were also in Egypt. Before the second great terrestrial catastrophe, I think it will be best if, before continuing to explain to you further about the mentioned observatory and other constructions erected there for the welfare of being existence, I should tell you, even though briefly, about the history of the arising there of such an indeed great learned society consisting of ordinary 3-brained beings, as this learned society at Chaldan then was on the continent of Atlantis. So he's going to teach about a secret Egyptian society? Okay, let's go. Okay, let's give us the deets, Gurgi. It is imperatively necessary to inform you of this because in the course of my further explanations concerning these three-brained beings of the planet Earth who have taken your fancy, I shall, in all probability, have to refer more than once to that society of learned beings there. I must also tell you about the history of the arising and existence of that society there on the continent Atlantis. So that, please do, so that you may also know that if the three-brained beings there on your planet, thanks to their being park dolg duty, that is to say, thanks to their conscious labors and intentional sufferings, ever attaining anything, then not only do they utilize these for the good of their own being, but also a certain part of these attainments is transmitted, as with us, by inheritance, and becomes the property of their direct descendants. Okay. You can perceive such a law-conformable result there from the fact that although towards the end of the existence of the continent Atlantis, abnormal conditions of ordinary being existence had already begun to be established, and that after the second great catastrophe, they deteriorated at such a rate that they soon finally crushed all their ableness to manifest the possibilities proper to the presence of three-brained beings. Nevertheless, their attainments of learning passed by inheritance, at least partially, even though mechanically, to their remote direct descendants. I must first tell you that I learned about this history thanks to what are called Teleoghinuras. I'm not going to attempt that again, which are at present in the atmosphere also of that planet Earth of yours. Okay. Is this the what is it? The tapes? Teleog. Is this like a GH in enough? Teleophinuras? Can I say that? Present in the atmosphere. Okay. As you probably do not yet know exactly what teleogenura is, yes, please explain. Try to transubstantiate in the corresponding parts of your common presence the information concerning this cosmic actualization. A teleogenura is materialized idea or thought after which its arising exists almost eternally in the atmosphere of that planet of which it arises. So he's kind of talking about a kind of akashic record here. I think the Taoists also have a version of this, like there's these kind of inner realm of temples which just record everything that happens. Anyway. Okay, and so he, instead of being a place, it's just an atmosphere which records ideas. And so, okay, he's telling us we can jack into this and download, get the cosmic downloads. Let's see what he says about this. The teleogenuras can be formed from such a quality of being contemplation as only those three-brained beings can actualize. Okay, wait. Oh, okay, this is interesting. So it's formed being who have coated their higher being bodies in their presences. Okay, so the contents of the teleogenuras can only be filled by beings who have higher being bodies. So it's almost like you reach a state of mastery and then you get access to this library house, but you can also put stuff in there, but it can never be infected by people of a lower being level. That's very interesting. So only men number 5, 6, and 7 and higher can access it, but the lower men can't, but we kind of need that. We need to break down the doors of the teleogenuras and steal all the works. Okay. Coated higher being bodies in their presences, and who have brought the perfecting of the reason of their higher being part up to the degree of martofatai. No, martfotai. There we go. I got it. Can't get me, Gurdjieff. And the sequential series of being ideas materialized in this way concerning any given event are called Tilnian thought tapes. There we go. The thought tapes. It seems that the said Korkaptilnian thought tapes concerning the history of the arising of the learned Akkadian were, as I found out much later, deliberately fixed by a certain eternal individual, Chilon, now a saint, who became coated in the common presence of a three-brained being named Tetetos. So we are three-brained beings. You may have a name, Justin, or something like that. Hello, Justin. And you will coat higher being bodies in you, and you'll gain a new being name. And even though your personality dies, your higher being body with its being name will become fixed in the universe and continue. Who wrote is that? I'm guessing that's what this is here. Who arose on your planet on the continent of Atlantis. So Tetetos was an Atlantean who achieved the development of his higher being bodies, and who had existed there 4 centuries before the second Great Transpalnian Perturbation. Okay, so he was 400 years old and then died at the collapse of Atlantis. These core Captilnian thought tapes are never destroyed as long as the given planet exists. Ooh, very interesting. Which is in what is called the tempo of movement of the prime arising, and they are subject to none of those transformations from any cosmic causes whatsoever, so which all other cosmic substances and cosmic crystallizations are periodically subject. So they're kind of clean, they're fixed, they stay there, they're not tampered with. You can access them if you've got the high enough being reason. And however long a time may have already passed, every three-brained being in whose presence there has acquired the ability to enter into the being state called Sorptakalnian contemplation, can perceive and cognize the text of these Korkaptilnian thought tapes. Oh baby, let's get that universal down. One idea for you to read after this is Exorial, Gregor A. Gregorius from the Fraternity of Saturn. Okay. The only thing I've read about the Fraternity of Saturn is the book by Stephen Flowers. He makes them seem pretty cray. I mean, they sound pretty cool. They sound pretty cool, but I don't know. I don't know. Should I be scared? I don't know. Gotos might find me up and beat me up in the astral. But what is this? The Exorial. Okay. Thank you, Serio. I'll check that up afterwards. So yeah, this is interesting, guys. So all we need to do is reach a being state called Sorptakalnian, and then we can access all of the previous thoughts of the master. So you know how people have like dreams of masters or talk about inner temples? This is, you could say that's their consciousness cognizing their entry into the Sorptakalnian tapes. Oh, sorry, into Korptalnian tapes. That's their consciousness cognizing that. So when people say, you know, I went and I saw, you know, the gods and they were telling me ineffable things or something, it could be like them, like a part of them just extends a little bit and they have a flash. And that's how they cognize it, because it's, what is it? It's being knowledge of a completely different order of being to them. So it looks like, you know, this grand astral library filled with all of this juicy information. And it's been around for as long as the Earth, and it's going to be around until the Earth's destruction. Oh, man. I really want to get those Korpkaptilnian tapes. And so, my boy, I myself learned about the details of the arising there of the Society of Calden, partly from the text of the just mentioned Teleogenora, and partly from many data which I learned much later, namely when, having become interested also in this highly important factor there, I made my usual detailed investigations. According to the text of the mentioned Teleogenora, and to data which I subsequently learned, it became clear and definitely known to me that this learned society of Calden, which arose then on the continent of Atlantis, and which was composed of three-brained beings of the Earth, was formed 735 years before the before the fall of Atlantis. I wonder if this number is a troll. This is 15 again. Once again, this makes the number, what is it, 7 plus 3, 10, plus 5, 15? Which goes down to 6. 6 in the tarot is the number of love, but 15 is the number of the devil, which is always interesting. I don't know, Gurdjieff never talked about the tarot, so I wonder what he's doing with these numbers here. Did he talk about the tarot? Anyway. It was founded on the initiative of a being there named Belkutasi. I like how he's got cult in his name. And also Beelzebub? Belkutasi. That's a very interesting name. He was then able to bring the perfecting of his higher being part to the being of a saint eternal individual. Let's go. That's what we want. And this higher part of his now already dwells on the holy planet Purgatory. Let's go. My elucidation of all those inner and outer being impulses and manifestations which caused this Belkutasi, then to found that truly great society of ordinary three-brained beings, a society which in its time was throughout the whole universe called envied for imitation. Showed that when this same later saint individual, Belkutasi, was once contemplating, according to the practice of every normal being, and his thoughts were by association concentrated on himself, that is to say, on the sense and aim of his existence, he suddenly sensed and cognized that the process of the functioning of the whole of him had until then proceeded not as it should have proceeded according to sane logic. This unexpected constatation shocked him so profoundly that thereafter he devoted the whole of himself exclusively to be able at any cost to unravel this and understand. First of all, he decided to attain without delay such a potency as would give him the strength and possibility to be quite sincere with himself. Okay, so the first thing he had to do when he realized he was insane, the first thing he had to do was gain self-honesty, because he couldn't lie to himself. It's so easy to just be like, nah, I'm good. It's too easy to say that, to brush things off. He needed to be able to hold in his being cognition true objective data of himself. So he needed to be able to not lie to himself. So true, sincere self-honesty. That is to say, to be able to conquer those impulses which had become habitual in the functioning of his common presence from the many heterogeneous take a shot every time I mispronounce something, as associations arising and proceeding in him, and which were started in him by all sorts of accidental shocks coming from outside, and also engendered within him, namely the impulses called self-love, pride, vanity, and so on. So, external shocks from the outside world, poopy. Internal shocks arising from contemplation, good. When, after incredible, what are called organic and psychic efforts, he attained to this, he then, without any mercy for these being impulses which had become inherent in his presence, began to think and recall just when and what various being impulses had arisen in his presence during the period preceding all this, and how he had consciously or unconsciously reacted to them. Okay, this is interesting. He's going through the process of how to dissolve these impulses. So basically, if you see pride, vanity, and self-love within yourself, you try to find the first instance of this arising in your being presence, and then you try to reconstruct that in your memory, and then notice what your reactions are, what the prime reactions are in that first arising. What did your body do? What did your emotional center do? What were the associations of thoughts that came up? Analyzing himself in this manner, he began to recall just which impulses evoked which reactions in him, in his independently spiritualized parts, that is to say, in his body, in his feelings, and in his thoughts. And the state of his essence. Okay, that's interesting. Right down to his very core. When he reacted to anything more or less attentively, and how and when, in consequence of such reactions of his, he had manifested consciously with his eye, or had acted automatically under the direction of his instinct alone. So yeah, he then has to go through his life, his memory, like a comb, and look at himself and judge, like, when was I acting mechanically and when was I actually acting? And I think if we all did that, we'd be horrified to realize how little we actually act. That we don't do things, things just happen to us. And it was just then that this bearer of the saint individual Belkutasi, recalling in this way all his former perceptions, experiencings, and manifestations, clearly constated in consequence that his exterior manifestations did not at all correspond either to the perceptions or to the impulses definitely formed in him. Further, he then began to make similar sincere observations of the impressions coming from outside as well as those formed within himself, which were perceived by his common presence, and he made them all with the same exhaustive conscious verifications of how these impressions were perceived by his separate spiritualized parts, how and on what occasions they were experienced by the whole of his presence, and for what manifestations they became impulses. Okay, so it's not just pride and self-love and other aspects that arise within you, and you try to find the first arisings and your reactions, but then he also went through everything external that happened to him the first time he experienced it, what effects that they did. So he went through both his internal and external experiences, and so he didn't just fight one world, he went through both. And it's interesting, he went from inside out. So he didn't just look through and think about his life and everything that happened to him. He went back and just made he cleaned his, what would you call it, his mirror, cleaned his internal nature of all of this arising, and then basically saw his reactions to the external world as a secondary thing. Very interesting. Very interesting. These exhaustive, conscious observations and impartial constatations finally convinced Belkutasi that something proceeded in his own common presence, not as it should have proceeded according to sane logic. So maybe he notices the consequences of the Kundabava organ. So what does he do? This is massive, man. Chapter 23, Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, has some hot stuff. As it became clear to me during my subsequent detailed investigations, although Belkutasi had become indubitably convinced of the accuracy of his observations on himself, yet he doubted the correctness of his own sensations and understandings, and also the normalness of his own psychic organization. So he realized something was wrong in himself. Then he went through this great self-analysis of all of his internal kind of principles and how they first arose, and then all of his memories of interacting with the external world and the arisings that they then arose. And even after that, he still doubted that he was properly kind of formed. So it's like, how many people in spiritual movements have, like, come in as broken people and then they have one experience? They do meditates once and then all of a sudden they're enlightened and better than Jesus. Belkutasi did not fall for that. And he therefore set himself the task of elucidating, first of all, whether he was in general normal in sensing and understanding all this, just in this way and not otherwise. So he made his conclusions, but then he realized that they're still subjective conclusions. So he was able to do a work in a subjective way, but he realized that his subjective work still wasn't objective. And there still be maybe sides of himself that are unknown to him. Very smart. I like Belkutasi. To carry out this task of his, he decided to find out how the same would be sensed and cognized by others. With that aim, he began inquiring among his friends and acquaintances to try to find out from them how they sensed it all, and how they cognized their past and present perceptions and manifestations. Doing this, of course, very discreetly, so as not to touch the aforementioned impulses inherent in them, namely self-love, pride, and so on, which are unbecoming to three-brained beings. This is something very interesting as well. How do you extract information from people who are assholes? Like, you want to join a spiritual group? People want to join a spiritual group and they want everyone to be spiritual. People want to join an initiatic order and they want them all to be higher beings. Or an occult school or a society, and everybody wants them to always... You want these people to be greater than you, but they're not. They're not built different. They're all built the same. Everyone's an asshole. And what you need to learn is there is no perfect Akhaldan society on Earth, or maybe there is, but you ain't going to get access to it. The only ones you have access to are the ones filled with assholes. And so you have to understand, when you meet a guy who's an asshole, a spiritual asshole, but he has knowledge that you want, or maybe that you need for the further development of your being, how do you extract out of that person that knowledge? That is the perfect knowledge of inquiry. How do you get you go and find a guru who is enlightened, and he's an asshole, and all of his followers are delusional, but he is connected to a tradition. He has learned sacred scriptures, and he may have some knowledge that you need. How do you extract knowledge from that kind of person without touching their self-love and their pride? That is a skill. That is something to cultivate. Thanks to these inquiries, Belkatassi gradually succeeded in evoking sincerity in his friends and acquaintances, and as a result, it turned out that all of them sensed and saw in themselves everything just the same as he did. Now, among these friends and acquaintances of Belkatassi, there were several earnest beings who were not yet entirely slaves to the action of the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabafo. And who, having penetrated to the gist of the matter, also became very seriously interested in it, and began to verify that which proceeded in themselves, and independently to observe those around them. Soon after, on the initiative of the same Belkatassi, they began to meet together from time to time and to share their observations and new constatations. This is what a true esoteric group is. It's not an esoteric group isn't a group of enlightened masters singing Kumbaya, nor is it a group of losers or a group of just people studying books. It's where an essence in a person is active and in participation with their being in the universe. That person is an occultist, an esotericist, a Gnostic. And when a group of these people who all have active essences engaging with their being in the universe meet to share their experiences, that is a real esoteric group. Very based, Gurdjieff. After prolonged verifications, observations, and impartial constatations, this entire group of terrestrial beings also became categorically convinced, just like Belkatassi himself, that they were not as they ought to be. Take that. Oh my God. Spiritual, you're just fine the way you are. You're a goddess already. We're all born masters. There is no path. Just be. Cringe. Thank you, Belkatassi, for negating hippie bullshit. Not long after, many others, also having such presences, joined that group of terrestrial beings. Okay. So, and later they founded that society, which they named the Society of Akhaldans. This is how you start a real group. You don't start a non-for-trust foundation and then advertise and try to enchant a bunch of people. That's just how you start a cult. If you want to start a real group, it starts off as a fraternity, as one guy gets a little bit of something, and then he kind of works in a group of close friends. And by the very magnetic nature of that group, it attracts other members who are then vetted and let in, and eventually, if the work is true, it naturally grows and you can found a society. That's how a real esoteric society, a real esoteric fraternity is organically grown. Don't start your own esoteric fraternity. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just get with some friends, get down and dirty, do the work. That's all you need to do. By the word Akhaldan, the following conception was then expressed. Okay. The striving to become aware of the sense and aim of the being of beings. That's pretty cool, actually. The sense and aim of the being of beings. Aim, purpose, teleos. becoming aware of teleos, the direction of the universe. From the very beginning of the foundation of this society, Belkatasi himself stood at its head, and the subsequent actions of the beings of the society proceeded under his general guidance. For many terrestrial years, this society existed under the said name, and its member beings were then called Akaldan Servors. But later, when the members of this society, for purposes of a general character, were divided into a number of independent groups, the members belonging to different groups came to be called by different names, and this division of theirs into groups occurred for the following reasons. When they had finally become convinced that there was something very undesirable in their presences, and they had begun to seek means and possibilities of achieving its removal, in order to become such as, according to sane logic, they ought to have been corresponding to the sense and aim of their existence, the elucidation of which, whatever it might cost them, they made the basis of their task, and when they proceeded to actualize in practice this task, previously decided upon their reason. Oh, Jesus Christ. It very soon became clear that it was imperatively necessary for its fulfillment to have in their reason more detailed information of various special branches of knowledge. What a paragraph. What he's saying here is cause and effect. You do a cause, you get an effect. We realize we're retarded freaks and we want to become higher beings. So you need a cause to get that effect. Problem, we all have different conditions. If you're a teacher or you've had kids before, you have a group of 10 people, you give them all the same instructions, they go off, you get 10 different results back. So it doesn't matter what the cause is. It does matter what the cause is. But you also need to study different conditions, study different systems. That just becomes a thing. So the Akaldan society eventually broke up via necessity. I guess its size became big enough, but via necessity to the different conditions owing to the different members. But, Jesus, we're 2 hours in. Let's go. We're getting to the end. I feel we're getting to the end. But as it proved impossible for each and every one of them to acquire the necessary special knowledge, they divided themselves for convenience into a number of groups, so that each group might separately study one of these special branches of knowledge required for their common aim. And this is why you see different systems that are kind of weird, because some systems will be very simple, and it will just be cause and effect, like Vipassana meditation. Just this one technique, and that's it. You don't get anything else. And rarely people always come out of that being like, oh, amazing, but you rarely get any masters coming out of that tradition. Why? Because they don't have techniques that focus on the different conditions of the different people. But then you get other systems that just become ultra bloated with all these other practices. And it's like, yeah, they have all of these processes to deal with the conditions of the different members, but then people get lost in some of those other practices, and it's like, oh, I'll do a little taro here, a little kabbalah there, and you just kind of get lost. You just get lost in these, all these different kind of, all numerology, don't do numerology, or all gematria. I'm just going to become absolutely schizo and trying to convert scripture into numbers and then back into different words. Yeah, don't do that. People get lost in these big bloated systems, or sometimes, some of the bloat is caused by, someone part of the condition is health. So a part of the system will become oriented to like esoteric medicine, but then that branch will go off and it will actually lose its inner core. So the cause and effect of the progress of being will be lost. But then you'll have this system that's just kind of a medicine system, and it may be that's good. It's good for you to go into those schools and use the techniques there to help you with your conditions and help you with your processes, but just don't stay in those schools. So it can be useful every now and then to travel around, to, go check out a Kundalini yoga place, go check out I don't want to say like Reiki's gay, but, check out a Rosicrucian school, check out some Hermetic places. You check out different places and you look for elements of initiation. And there can be, you usually find elements of initiation left in places by, beings that have reached man 5, 6, and 7. In all of these different, you can get really surprised. Even in art or poetry, man, you can find the presences, you can find elements left by men number 5, 6, and 7. So it's always in work, like in the work, one of the things you want to cultivate is as broad a horizon as possible, but at the same time, a discernment to close doors that will lead you off the path. You want to crystallize that kind of thing within yourself so that you can kind of pick up all these different little elements that will help you reconcile your conditions so that when you apply the causes, the main practices, sexual transmutation, self-remembering, then they'll actually have their corresponding effects, i.e. the coding of higher being bodies and whatnot. Now, here, my boy, you should notice that genuine objective science just then arose and began to exist there for the first time. First time. I guess just forget Lemuria. Screw Lemurians. First time Atlantis. And developed normally up to the time of the second great catastrophe of their planet. Also, that the rate of the development of some of its separate branches then progressed at an indeed unprecedented tempo. So some of not the main branch of the Accaldans, but even other different branches proceeded at different speeds. Very interesting. So you get all these different techniques. And even some desperate branches may have had greater initiates than even the main branch, the main Atlantean branch. And in consequence, many great and small cosmic, what are called objective truths, gradually began at that period to become evident, also to those three-brained beings who have taken your fancy. The learned members of this first and perhaps last great terrestrial learned society were then divided into 7 independent groups, or as it is otherwise said, sections, and each of these groups or sections received its definite designation. The members of the first group of the society, Accaldan, were called Accaldan Folk Sauveurs. Very well. Which meant that the beings belonging to that section studied the presences of their own planet as well as the reciprocal action of its separate parts. Okay. The members of the second section were called Accaldan Strasovers, and this meant that the beings belonging to that section studied what are called radiations of all the other planets of their solar system, and the reciprocal action of these radiations. Very interesting. The members of the third section were called Accaldan Metrosovers, which meant beings occupied with the study of that branch of knowledge similar to that branch of our general knowledge we call Silkurnano, and which partially corresponded to what your contemporary favorites called mathematics, so we're thinking Pythagoras. The members of the fourth group, so first group studied presences of their own planet as the reciprocal action of separate parts, so nature, people who studied elementals, this other planets and their radiations, this is celestial magic, this is, astronomy, astrology. This here is mathematics, Pythagoreanism. Members of the fourth group called Accaldan Psychosovers. Damn, sounds based. And this name then defined those members of the society Accaldan who made their observations of the perceptions, experiencing, and manifestations of beings like themselves and verified their observations by statistics. Okay, so these are, psychics who then study visions, or the science of visions and experiences and different mental states. Perhaps this is like, you could say, different forms of meditation came from these guys. Very interesting. Very interesting. Oh, there's more. The fifth group were called Accaldan Harnsovers, which meant that they were occupied with the study of a branch of knowledge which combined those two branches of contemporary science, which your favorites call chemistry and physics. So we talk in alchemy, or external alchemy. The members belonging to the sixth section were Accaldan Mistesovers, that is to say, beings who studied every kind of fact arising outside of themselves, those actualized consciously from without, and also those arising spontaneously, and which of them and in what cases are erroneously perceived by beings. Are these like phenomenologists? Is this what this is? What's the difference between the fourth group and the sixth group? Because the fourth group observe perceptions, experiences, and manifestations, and the fifth group studies arisings outside themselves. So is this like the fourth group is the experiences internally, and the sixth group is like literally like external illusions and things like that? And like hypnosis is okay. Well, there's that. There's that. Let's just bracket that, and maybe we'll come back to it. And then as regards to the members of the seventh and last group, they were called, oh, Jesus Christ, a Kaldan Jezpud. There's a J and an N next to each other. Jnisovers, a Kaldan Gez. Gurdjieff! A Kaldan Gezpud Jnisovers. Why do you do this to me, Gurdjieff? Why? These members of the Akaldan Society devoted themselves to the study of those manifestations in the presences of the three-brained beings of their planet, which proceeded in them, not in consequence of various functionings issuing from different kinds of qualities, impulses engendered owing to data already present in them, but from cosmic actions coming from outside and not depending on themselves. So I think these are guys who just study the human machine purely on like external celestial movements or something. This number seven's quite mysterious, and I'm not quite sure on the difference between number 6 and 4, but the others are quite clear, I believe. So 7 different factions. The three-brained beings of your planet who became members of this society actually did a great deal in respect of approaching objective knowledge, which had never been done there before, and which perhaps will never be repeated. And here it is impossible not to express regret and to repeat that to the most great misfortune of all terrestrial three-brained beings of all later epochs, it was just then, when after incredible being labours by members of that great society, the required tempo of work had already been established with regard to discernment, conscious on their part and also with regard to their unconscious preparation, for the welfare of their descendants, that in the heat of it all, certain of them constated, as I have already told you, that something serious was to occur to their planet in the near future. Okay, this is them realizing the catastrophe of Atlantis, hence they sent that one guy all the way to Asia to study more. For the purpose of discerning the character of the anticipated serious event, they dispersed over the whole planet, and shortly afterwards, as I have already told you, the aforesaid second transpalmian perturbation occurred to that ill-fated planet of yours. Well then, my boy, when after this catastrophe, I feel like "well then, my boy" is almost like a reset phrase that he's trying to like hypnotize you with. So it's like, "Well then, my boy," oh yeah, that's right. Oh, we're having a conversation. When after this catastrophe a number of the surviving beings, members of that great learned society, gradually came together, they, no longer having their native country, first settled together with most of the other surviving beings in the center of the continent Grabonsi, so Africa, but later, when they had on the continent Grabonski come to themselves a little after the cataclysm, not according to law, which had occurred, they decided jointly to try to re-establish and perhaps to continue to actualize in practice all those tasks which had formed the basis of their last society. As the manifestations of those abnormal conditions of being existence of most of the three-brained beings there, which had already been established before the catastrophe, had by this time already begun to boil furiously on the said part of the surface of the continent Grabonski, these surviving members of the Society of Kaldan looked for another place on the same continent for their permanent existence more suitable for this work of theirs which demanded complete separateness. Such a suitable place they found in the valley of the large river, flowing on the north of the said continent. There indeed they all migrated together with their families to continue in isolation the attainment of the tasks set by their society. So I assume they mean the Nile here, and north of the continent, I assume Egypt. So the original Accountant Society made a secret base in the center of Africa, but then migrated north to Egypt. That's interesting, but I don't want to go off on a giant tangent because we're already past 2 hours. Let's just keep going. Let's keep going, guys. Let's make it. This entire region through which the said large river flowed, they named Sakronakari. Ooh. But this name was afterwards several times changed, and the present time, this region is called Egypt. Why does he say, he just says, he's going to say that as a one-off and it was changed and never go back to it. What is in here? Sakronakari. What is he trying to say there? It's like similar to Sakaki. Anyway. While the said large river, then called Nipilhuachi, is now, as I have already said, called the Nile, soon after certain former members of the learned society of Chaldan had settled on this part of the surface of the planet, Earth. All the beings of our tribe, who then existed on the surface of that planet, which has taken your fancy, migrated to the same place. Okay. So, all of the superior Martian beings also went to Egypt. And the relations of our tribe with that part of your planet, and also with the first migration there, of the chance surviving members of the Society of Chaldan were as follows. I told you once that just before the second Trans-Palnean perturbation, our party Pythoness, while prophesying, insisted that all beings of our tribe should without delay migrate for the continuation of their existence on that planet to a definite part of the surface of that same continent now called Africa. This definite part of the surface of the continent, which the Pythoness indicated, lay just at the source of the said large river Nipilhuachi, where the beings of our tribe existed all the time the said second Trans-Palnean perturbation lasted. Okay. So basically, at the head of the Nile was a secret, I guess where ancient Alexandria, close to that would have been. There is where the secret cache of Martians stashed themselves during the fall of Atlantis, the cataclysm. As well as later, when everything had gradually resumed its relatively normal state, and when most of the surviving beings had then almost forgotten what had happened, and had again formed, just as if nothing had occurred to them, one of their famous centers of culture in the very center of that future Africa. And it was just when the former members of the Achaldan Society were searching for a suitable place for their permanent existence that they chanced to meet a number of the beings of our tribe who advised them to migrate to the country further down the said river. Our acquaintanceship and our friendly relations with many of the former members of the Society of Chaldan had already begun on the continent of Atlantis, almost from the founding of that society. Do you remember I told you that when I descended to that planet for the first time, and the beings of our tribe assembled in the city of Samlios with my participation in order together to find a way out of the difficult situation that had been created, those general meetings of ours were held in one of the sections of the principal cathedral of the Society of Chaldan, and from that time on good relations were established between many beings of our tribe and certain members of the society. We all live in a society. And there, in that future Egypt, whither both had migrated in the said way, the relations of the beings of our tribe with the authentic former members themselves who chanced to be saved, and also with the descendants of other authentic members, remained uninterrupted and continued almost until the departure of our tribe from your planet. Yes. Although the hope of the few chance surviving members of the Society of Chaldan that they would be able to resume the actualizing of the task of their society was not fulfilled, nevertheless, thanks to them alone, there still continued to be present in the presences of beings of several subsequent generations, after the loss of Atlantis, the instinctive conviction concerning the sense of what is called their completed personal being. Okay, so they want completed personal being. Let's go. In addition, thanks to them, something of what had been attained by the reason of the three-brained beings there also, nevertheless, survived when that reason was still normal in them. After a while, this something began mechanically to be transmitted by inheritance from generation to generation, and reached the beings of quite recent periods, even to several beings of contemporary times. Among those results of the learned attainments of the members of the Society of Calden, which were transmitted by inheritance, were also without question those ingenious and solid constructions which I saw being erected during this fourth descent of mine to your planet, by the beings of whom I am just going to inform you, who were breeding on that part of the surface of the continent of the present Africa. Okay, there we go. So the construction of the observatory in Thebes was a kind of genealogical inheritance of the being reason of the Accaldans. Cool. Although the expectations that I had formed from all that's interesting because, beings who reach a state of 5, 6, and 7, even if they don't transmit teachings, if they have a child, that child may not attain the same level of being as them, but there's something in them that's kept genealogically in their inheritance which can manifest in later periods. So it could be like even scientists or thinkers, philosophers, mystics, poets in later periods in our planet. There's something in them that exerts itself, or maybe there's something in us that burns in us, that wants this being, this perfection of being. That's the Accaldan memory, the drop of Accaldan blood that we all have within us, activating and trying to get us to do the work. Although the expectations that I had formed from all that our countrymen had told me concerning the mentioned new observatory there, before I had seen it with my own eyes, were not justified nevertheless. The observatory itself, and also the other constructions of beings then on that region, proved to be exceedingly ingenious, and provided data for the enrichment of my common presence, by a great deal of productive information for my consciousness. Oh, good for you, Bilsey, good for you. And in order that you may clearly represent, I wonder if this is also a thing that Gurdjieff is trying to say. Like Gurdjieff is like, you should study Egypt and you'll get some interesting data out of it. Anyway, and in accordance that you may clearly represent to yourself and understand how these various constructions were then erected by the three-brained beings of this region for the welfare of their being existence, I think it will be enough if I explain to you in as great detail as possible how the particularity of their ingenious practical invention was manifested in respect of their new observatory, on account of which I had decided to visit that region. It's never ending. Let's go. We're going to get 3 hours here. I can feel it. For this purpose, I must first of all inform you of 2 facts connected with the change in the common presences of these three-brained beings who have taken your fancy. The first is that at the outset, while they were still existing normally, that is, as it is in general becoming to all three-brained beings to exist. Thank you for that sentence. And while they had what is called Ulu Estesnoknian sight? Ulu Estesnoknian sight, they could also perceive at a distance proper to be perceived by ordinary three-brained beings. What the hell does that even mean? I'm breaking. This chapter is so long. The visibility of all great as well as small cosmic concentrations, existing beyond them during every process of the omnipresent Okidanok which proceeded in their atmosphere. Oh, okay, wait a second. So they started studying the omnipresent Okidanok and its cosmic concentrations. Come on. In addition, those of them who were consciously perfected and had thereby brought the sensibility of the perception of their organ of sight, like three-brained beings everywhere else, up to what is called the Ulu Estratesnoknian state, I'm not even going to attempt to do that again, acquired the possibility of perceiving also the visibility of all these cosmic units situated at the same distance, which arise and have their further existence dependent upon the crystallizations localized directly from the sacred Theomertmologos, that is to say, from the emanations of our most holy Son, Absolute. Sirio says, this means that he was a H.P. Lovecraft fan. Oh. Perhaps. I wonder if Gurdjieff did read Lovecraft. Because he doesn't seem to... He seems to dunk on Americans, and because Lovecraft was American, I'm not sure if he would have been like, what is this? Maybe they had similar sources. Like, what is it? Maybe they both read... who's the guy who wrote The King in Yellow? Someone Chambers? Maybe they both read similar things. Anyway... Okay, so they were studying the rays that came off the Holy Sun Absolute, the midnight sun. And later, when the same constant, abnormal conditions of ordinary being existence were finally established, as a consequence of which great nature was compelled, for reasons of which I have already told you, among other limitations also to degenerate the functioning of their organ of sight into what is called Koritesnoknian, that is to say, into the sight proper to the presences of one-brained and two-brained beings. Okay, so we used to have clairvoyance in Atlantis and perhaps a little post-Atlantis, but then it degenerated and we no longer can perceive directly and study the cosmic ray, the rays from the Holy Sun Absolute, or the process of the Okidanok with our bare eyes, so we need to construct devices to do this. Then, thereafter, they were able to perceive the visibility of their great as well as their small concentrations situated beyond them, only when the sacred process proceeded in the omnipresent active element Okidanok in the atmosphere of their planet. Isn't this the process of repentance? Anyway, of their, or what is it, remorse, of the planet, or as they themselves say, according to their understanding and their own perceptions on dark nights. That's interesting. Okay. And the second fact, by virtue of the same degeneration of their sight into Koritesnoknian, is based on the law that common to all beings, namely that the results obtained from every manifestation of the omnipresent Okidanok are perceived by the organs of sight only when in immediate contact with those vibrations which are formed in beings and which actualize the functioning of the being organ for perceiving at the given moment the visibility of cosmic concentrations situated beyond them. That is to say, only when the said results of the manifestation of the omnipresent Okidanok proceed up to the limit beyond which, according to the quality of the given organ for perceiving visibility, what is called the momentum of the impulse dies down, or to put it otherwise, they perceive the visibility of objects only when almost next to them. Okay. Cool. Okay, so yeah, we don't have a spatial sense that can see over the horizon. Only when we're close to an object can we perceive it properly. But if the results take place beyond the mention, it makes me wonder, so good, Beelzebub must have these faculties, and he must be able to reach the friggin' Colnian tapes and whatnot himself. Okay, yeah, let's just keep going. My brain is getting fried. But if these results take place beyond the mentioned limit, then this manifestation does not at all extend to those beings in whose presences there are organs for the perception of visibility, formed only by the results of the totality of itoklanos. Here it is, this was mentioned before, but I'm too drained to remember. Here it is very opportune to repeat one of the profound sayings seldom used there of our Mullah Nassereddin, which very neatly defines the given case. That is, this degree of illumination of the perception of visibility of your contemporary favorites, This wise saying of his, seldom used there, consists of the following words: "Show me the elephant the blind man has seen, and only then will I believe that you have really seen a fly." Very profound. Well then, my boy, thanks to the artificial adaptation, which I had then seen for the observation of other cosmic concentrations, and which was being constructed in that future Egypt, of the initiative issuing from the reasons of the remote descendants of the members of the learned society of Calden, any one of these unfortunate favourites of yours, in spite of the Corritesnocnian sight, which had long before become inherent to them, could nevertheless acquire the ability to perceive freely at any time, as they say, of the day and night, the visibility of all those remote cosmic concentrations which, in the process of the general cosmic harmonious movement, come within the sphere of the horizon of their observation. In order to overcome this limitation, their organ of perception of visibility, they then invented the following: their tescuano, or telescope, the construction of which... Why does Beelzebub have a tescuano then, if he has amazing powers? It must, I guess, his is slightly different and has more power. Yeah. I guess there's a limit to also your being sight. Maybe his being sight may let him see across into other, like, planets if he's on another planet. But maybe his Tescawana just lets him see, like, right across the universe or something. Must here be said, passed to them, also from their remote ancestors, they did not fix on the surface of their planet, as was usually done there, and is still done now, but they placed this Tescawana very deeply within the planet, and they carried out their observations of the cosmic concentrations found beyond the atmosphere of their planet through specially bored pipe-like hollows. The observatory, I then saw, had 5 of these hollows. They began in relation to the horizon, from different places on the surface of the planet occupied by the observatory, but they all met in a small underground common hollow, which was something like a cave. From there the specialists, then called astrologers, made their observations for the purpose of studying, as I have already told you, the visible presences and results of the reciprocal action of other cosmic concentrations belonging to their own solar system, as well as other systems of the great universe. Very interesting. So there's underground stuff in Egypt, technology from Atlantis. They made these observations of theirs through any one of the mentioned hollows, which looked out in different directions onto their horizon, according to the given position of their planet relative to the cosmic concentration observed in the process of the common cosmic harmonious movement. Alrighty. I repeat, my boy, that although the chief peculiarity of the observatory constructed there by the 3-brained beings of the future Egypt proved not to be new to me, since this principle had also been utilized in my observatory on Mars, with only this difference, that my 7 long pipes were fixed not within the planet, but on it. Nevertheless, all their innovations were so interesting in detail that for any case that might arise, I even made, during my stay there, a detailed sketch of everything I saw, and later even used something of it in my own observatory. Okay, wow. Learning from the freaks, eh? And as regards the other constructions there, I shall perhaps tell you about them in detail some later. But meanwhile, I will only say that all these independent constructions, which were then not quite finished, were situated not far from the observatory itself, and were intended, as I elucidated during my inspection under the guidance of the constructor who accompanied us, and who was a friend of one of our tribe, partly for the same purpose of observing other suns, planets of our great universe, and partly for determining and intentionally directing the course of the surrounding atmosphere in order to obtain the climate desired. All these constructions of theirs occupied a fairly large open space of that part of the said region, and were enclosed by a special lattice work made of the plant then called Zalnakatar. No hits. Lol. Avocado. Well, it's worth a try. Okay, so there's a plant. And they did what with it? They made a special lattice. It is extremely interesting to notice that they erected at the chief entrance of that huge enclosure are a rather large of course in comparison with the size of their presences, stone statue called Sphinx. Ooh, which strongly reminded me of the statue I saw in my first descent in person to your planet in the city of Samlios, just opposite the enormous building belonging to the learned society of Akaldan. So sphinxes are symbols of the Akaldan society. So Mesopotamian sphinxes, let's go. Akaldan remnants, woo! Which was then called the chief cathedral of the society of Akaldan. The statue I saw in the city of Samlios, and which greatly interested me, was the emblem of this society and was called Conscience. It represented an allegorical being, each part of whose planetary body was composed of a part of the planetary body of some definite form of being existing there, but of the parts of those beings of other forms, who, according to the crystallized notions of the three-brain beings there, had to perfection one or another being function. The main mass of the planetary body of the said allegorical being was represented by the trunk of a being their definite form called Bull. The bull trunk rested on the forelegs of another being existing there, also of a definite form called Lion. And to the part of the bull trunk called its back, two large wings were attached, similar to the appearance of those of a strong bird being breeding there called Eagle. And onto the place where the head should be, there was fixed to the bull trunk by means of a piece of amber, two breasts representing in themselves what are called breasts of a virgin. Huh. That's interesting. I'm sorry, that's just a... Remember when he's, like, chapter, like, 1 to 8, when he's talking about spaceships, and he's talking about the perpetual motion machine. One of the ingredients was amber. And now he's talking about the thing that connects the bull part to the human part is amber. When I became interested on the continent Atlantis in this strange allegorical image and then inquired about its meaning, one of the learned members of the great society of men beings explained it to me as follows. This allegorical figure is the emblem of the society of Akaldan and serves for all its members as a stimulus constantly to recall and awaken in them the corresponding impulse attributed to this allegorical figure. Further, he continued, each part of this allegorical figure gives to every member of our society in all the three independently associating parts of his common presence, namely in the body, in the thoughts, and in the feelings, a shock for corresponding associations, for those separate cognizers, which in their totality can alone give us the possibility of gradually getting rid of those undesirable factors present in every one of us, both those transmitted to us by heredity as well as those acquired by ourselves personally, which gradually engender within us impulses undesirable for us, and as a consequence of which we are not as we might be. This emblem, of course, constantly reminds and indicates to us that it is possible to attain freedom from what I have mentioned only if we compel our common presence always to think, feel, and act in corresponding circumstances according to that which is expressed in this emblem of ours. Also remember the cherubim in the book of Ezekiel are made up of the same animals as the Sphinx. So that could also be another kind of Akaldan remnant. Kabbalah has some Atlantean connection to it. Anyway, and this emblem of ours is understood by all of us members of the Society of Akaldan in the following way. The trunk of this allegorical being represented by the trunk of a bull means that the factors crystallized in us and which engender in our presences the impulses maleficent for us, those we have inherited, as well as those we have personally acquired, can be regenerated only by indefatigable labors, namely by those labors for which among the beings of our planet the bull is particularly fitted. The trunk, this rests on the legs of a lion, means that the said labors should be performed with that cognizance, feeling of courage and faith in one's might, the property of which might is possessed among all the beings of earth in the highest degree by the possessor of these legs, the mighty lion. The wings, the strongest of the highest soaring of all birds, the eagle, attached to the bull trunk, constantly remind the members of our society that during the said labors, with the mentioned inner psychic properties of self-respect, it is necessary to meditate continually on the questions not related to the direct manifestations required for ordinary being existence. And as regards to the strange image of the head of our allegorical being in the form of the breasts of a virgin, this expresses that love should predominate always in everything during the inner and outer functions evoked by one's consciousness. Interesting. So bull labor, work, but also the work shouldn't be slovenly. It should be injected with the fire and might of a lion. Get after it. Get that David Goggins mode going. But also something higher. We also need to be continuously contemplating the heights of the eagle. And as well as we do all of these things, we imbue them all with love. Such a love can arise and be present only in the presences of concentrations formed in the lawful parts of every whole responsible being in whom hopes of our common Father are placed. So it's not a love that we cultivate like an emotional love. It's like an inner love, almost for the work itself, placed in it, Domin Day style. By God himself places this love for the work within us. And that the head is fixed to the trunk of the bull with amber signifies that this love should be strictly impartial. That is to say, completely separated from all the other functions proceeding in every whole responsible being. So it's independent love. Love that's not dependent on a situation or any external circumstance. It's just it's perpetual because it sustains itself in and of itself. In order, my boy, that the sense of this latter emblem put into the material called their amber may become quite comprehensible to you, I must add that amber is one of those 7 planetary formations in the arising of which the omnipresent active Okidano takes part, with all 3 separate independent sacred parts in equal proportion, and in the process of planetary actualizations, these intraplanetary surplanetary formations serve for what is called the impeding of the independent flow of these 3 localized independent sacred parts. Very interesting. So amber is an interesting property. Esoteric property. At this point of his tale, Beelzebub made a short pause, as if he were thinking about something, and afterwards continued. During my narration of what I then saw on a still surviving terra firma part of the surface of your planet among the 3 brain beings there, certain of whom were the direct descendants of members of the truly great learned society of Calden, there the result of the manifestations of my being reason was that owing to various associative recollections of all kinds of impressions, of the perceptions of the visibility of the exterior environment of the said region, which have become fixed in my common presence, there have been gradually revived in me all the scenes and all the associative flow of thoughts of one of these being experiences of mine, which occurred during my last stay there on my visit just to the same contemporary Egypt. Jesus Christ, Gurdjieff, you're killing me. You're killing me, Gurdjieff. When I once sat absorbed in thought at the foot of one of these constructions, which had chanced to survive from that period and which is now called their pyramids, it was just then that in the general functioning of my reason, there was also associated among other things the following. Good, if none of the benefits already formerly attained by the reason of the beings of the continent Atlantis for ordinary being existence has become the possession of the contemporary beings of this planet, then this might perhaps be logically explained simply because for cosmic reasons not issuing at all from and not depending upon the 3 brain beings there, that second great cataclysm not according to law occurred, during which not only that continent itself perished, but also everything which existed on it. But this Egypt, was not its magnificence still quite recent? Who's this? Is this Hassien talking? Or is this just Beelzebub thinking to himself? There is no denying it. Owing to the third small catastrophe to that ill-fated planet, and also to the fifth, about which I shall speak later, this part also of its surface, it is true suffered, having been covered with sands. Nevertheless, the three brained beings dwelling there did not perish, but were only scattered over various other parts of the same continent. Consequently, whatever new exterior conditions may have ensued, there should have survived in their presences. It would seem the crystallized results of the perfected factors transmitted to them by inheritance for normal being logical mentation. And so, my boy, being desirous after this distressful austusori of mine, or as your favorites would say, sorrowful reflections, to clear up for myself the very essence of the cause also of this lamentable fact there, I understood at the end of my minute investigations, and became aware with all my being that this abnormality there proceeds exclusively owing only to one remarkable aspect of the chief particularity of their strange psyche, namely that particularity which has become completely crystallized and is an inseparable part of their common presences, and which serves as a factor for the periodic arising in them of what is called the urgent need to destroy everything outside themselves. Oh yeah. Burn the books, baby. Pull down statues. The point is that when, during the apogee of the development of such a peculiarity terrifying to every reason of the psyche of the three brain beings, they began to manifest outside of themselves this phenomenal peculiarity of their common presences. That is to say, when they began to carry out on some part of the surface of their planet the process of reciprocal destruction, then at the same time, without any deliberate aim, and even without what is called organic need, they also destroy everything which chances to come within the sphere of their perception of their organ of sight. During the periods of this phenomenal psychopathic apogee, they destroy also all the objects in the given place, and at the given time, which these same beings themselves, between whom this terrifying process proceeds, have intentionally produced, as well as the productions which have chanced to survive and to reach them from the beings of previous epochs. So there comes a point where all of a sudden we just destroy everything from the past. Shit happens. God damn. I hate it when that happens. Well then, my boy, after the period of this fourth sojourn of mine in person on the surface of your planet, I first arrived in the country now called Egypt, and after having stayed there a few days among the remote descendants of the members of the great learned society at Calden, and becoming acquainted with certain surviving results of their being parked old duty for the welfare of their descendants, I afterwards, accompanied by two of our tribe, went to the southern countries of the same continent, and there, with the help of the local three-brained beings, caught the necessary number of 8 beings. Oh, thank God. Oh. Having accomplished this, I telepathically signaled our ship Occasion, which descended to us, it must be said, on the very first dark night, and when we had loaded these 8 beings into that special section of the ship Occasion, which had been constructed for Gornahor Hahak, under his directions, so Gornahor, his raven friend from Saturn, his directions, we at once reascended to the planet Mars, and 3 Martian days later on the same ship, and together with these apes, I ascended to the planet Saturn. And that was the original story. We started this chapter talking about why, Gertrude, why? Though we had previously decided to carry out the experiments with these apes only on the following year, when they would have become thoroughly acclimatized and oriented to this existence under the new conditions, I ascended then to the planet Saturn so soon, because at my last personal meeting with Gornahor Hahak, I had promised him to be present at his family solemnity, which had soon to take place. And this family solemnity of Gornahor Hahak's was that beings like himself, around him were to consecrate their first hair produced by him. Okay, baby shower. I promised to attend this family solemnity, Crick-Crack-Cree in order to undertake regarding his recently arisen hair what is called the Alnatorornian being duty. Oh, here it is interesting to remark that this kind of procedure for undertaking this being duty took place among the ancient three-brained beings of your planet also, and even, is it circumcision? And reached your contemporary favorites through these later, just as in everything else, take only external form of this serious and important procedure. The beings who undertake, as it were, these duties are called by your contemporary favorites godfathers and okay. So Beelzebub is the godparent of a little raven baby boy of the planet Saturn. The hair of Gonahor Harhak was then called Rakhurk. We made it. We made it. 2 hours, 50 minutes in. We made it. Thank you for watching, everybody. If you want to support this channel, the efforts, my pain, please give a one-time donation on PayPal. Like and subscribe. I've got a Ko-fi account. You can set up a payment system there. Something YouTube membership. Oh my god. Oh my god. See you all next time, everybody. See you all next time.